Test, 1, 2, test.
Right. Thank you. I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is the Village of Corrales Governing Body regular meeting. Thank you for attending. The first thing that we're going to do, I've called this to order. Now let's stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. The first thing I'm going to do is call the governing body. Councilor Waldman. Here. Councilor Murray.
Here.
Councilor Knight. Here. Councilor Lucero.
Here.
Councilor Parker.
Here.
And Councilor Burkett. Thank you very much. Now I know where to look. I was looking at the wrong part of the room. All right, the next thing on our is to approve our agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda? Thank you. And a second. All right, all in favor of approving the agenda, signify by aye. Aye. All right, the agenda has been approved. We're going to move on to reports. We're first going to start with the administrator's report. Please, Administrator Curry.
Thank you, Mayor.
It's hard, but you know, I think people are going to have to understand we are under mask. We will do our very best to get our. Tanya, you want to come on up, and Tanya will have a microphone.
Is it? Oh, and it's on.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, Administrator Curry. COVID update. So I'm sure a lot of you did watch the news conference today, and maybe you stayed on for the question and answer session, which is really gives you good information. But today, New Mexico is 8 out of 10 for the highest number of increases in COVID in the last 14 days. We had a 121% increase in the last 2 weeks or 14 days. Some of the predictions that came out is we should expect to stay at this or what would have been considered red level when we were doing turquoise, red, green for at least 10 more weeks. That's if we all do our part. Cases in Corrales right now are 379. They did not update. Sorry, 375. They did not update. They said they updated the map today. None of the numbers changed, and I checked all the zip codes, so they did not. The big thing on that is we had 29 cases so far in August since the 1st. We have to go all the way back to February when we had 31 to get to those numbers. The next was January where we had 54 cases. So we've had a big increase. We did have one day, August 2nd, we got 8 cases in one day. And those are just reported cases. Those aren't people that I know who've been ill or sick that don't want to get tested. Those are just the people who have actually got tested. Okay. Delta variant is pretty much 100% the variant that's in the state right now. The state case positivity rate is 9%. Which 7.5 was really the max we wanted to go to. The 9% means we're missing cases, and they know that we're missing cases. Hospitals are at contingency level 2, which for those of you in the medical, there
are some empty seats for people to come on in because we do have a bit of a max. So there are seats down here. Corey, if you want to come sit down.
We're at contingency level 2. The next level, as we climb in cases, we'll go back to crisis standard of care, which means when care, I hate to say it, is rationed, you could go in with a car wreck or something and you may not get treated. So we really need to get the hospitalized cases under control. 75% of the adults in New Mexico have at least 1 shot. That's amazing. And then 66% are both. Sandoval County has 81.2%, big clap, with 1 shot. 71.7 with both shots. So Sandoval County is doing really, really good. 3rd shot boosters are here for immunocompromised, people with active cancer, bone marrow transplants in the last 2 years, on prednisone, a few diseases. They are here. People can start registration right now. We've already registered people. Organ transplant, they can get their 3rd shot of Moderna or Pfizer. There is still not, they're looking at the data of what to do with people who need a booster who got J&J. That's not out yet. And then within ACIP, which is the Advisory Committee for Immunization Practices, is meeting on the 24th to start looking at boosters for the rest of the population. And it looks like it'll probably be over a certain age. Healthcare first responders will be the first line up. Just waiting to see when they have that meeting, how that comes out. I have not heard if they're going to vote that meeting or do like they did with the boosters meeting, discuss it, do committee, and then vote in 2 more weeks. Vaccines have been mandated in all hospitals, congregate settings, jails, places like that. You can get a religious or a medical exemption, but that's it. And if those places get those exemptions, then it's weekly testing that is mandated. I thought there was something else I wanted to say, but I didn't write it down, so it must not have been that important. I'm working with village staff to ramp up. We do know that when I'm getting people in already for 3rd shots. They've called, we've got them registered. But we know that when it's booster time, because of the age and population in Corrales, we're probably going to have a lot of people who qualify. So we're getting ready to ramp up and be ready to work with DOH and our staff to do the larger pods, not just the ones that we've been running every week. And we may carry Moderna. It just depends on how much. Moderna, we have to order 140 doses, which doesn't seem like a lot, but we've already got a lot of Pfizer and I'm going to order more Pfizer, and we don't have the freezer for the Moderna. It's a regular freezer. We have a ultra low, and Chief said I don't have any more room for another freezer. But if it looks like we can do 30 or do 140 in 30 days because they've opened it up for boosters, we will, so citizens can come here instead of having to walk into Walgreens or Walmart to get their booster shot. And I'll be happy to stand for questions.
Terrific. Do we have questions from anyone here? Yes, Councilor Murray, then
Yeah.
Councilor Woolman, and then Councilor Knight.
Thank you, Mayor. Commander Khan, do we know, is it going to register through the state to get your booster shot, or is that going to be an email sent out?
No, you register through the state. So when you registered, if someone in this room had cancer, immunocompromised conditions, and they list them out in there, you go in and you can automatically register yourself. It will pop up that you are clear for a 3rd dose for those conditions. If you're not sure if you have those conditions, call your primary care doctor and ask them, and they will guide you through it, or you can call me and I can get you to a DOH specialist, or epidemiologist, or some of the stuff I can just tell you, yes, that counts, no, that doesn't.
Thank you.
Councilor Woolman?
Yes, Tony, do you know of the new cases? How many of those were fully vaccinated?
No, we don't, but I do know that in the ICU right now, only 1 person is fully vaccinated, and I do not know in New Mexico, but I do not know what their underlying health conditions. We know that breakthrough data with Delta and even with Beta before that and Alpha, the older you are, the less our immune systems work. It just happens. Once we hit about 35, our body just starts going down. So we know that their immune systems of the older population, so it's usually over 65 that where breakthrough cases are going to come in. But you could be an organ transplant patient, and those studies showed because they're so immune suppressed, they weren't getting any immune response from this, or very little.
Thank you.
Yes, Councilor Knight.
Mayor and Commander, so it'll just be on Thursdays then, like you've been doing them in the past over at the rec center?
So we do a vaccine site every Wednesday. We've never stopped. We've had a vaccine site in the village since February. And we're doing Wednesday evenings. Well, we needed to work around soccer. Soccer is Tuesday, Thursday. And I'm working on their schedule. We do them in the evenings. We also do pop-up clinics at the fire station that have been really good. We did 24 in an hour, which was more than I expected to show up, but it's a little crazy when you do that many. I like doing 6.5 hours and then 6 the next half hour. But I also get people, I had someone call me on Saturday night and said, I really need a vaccine Sunday. So I said, okay. And I opened up a site and I filled it to 10 people. So when people call, I can open up sites as well. But we have not picked a day yet because we need to get with DOH. I need to get with Lynn. I need to get with Mike Chavez and see what days, because if it looks like we're going to do 300-400 people, we need 20-25 people to run those sites.
Well, thank you. And
You're
thanks for
welcome.
all you did this past year and a half.
Indeed,
Thank you.
a treasure.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you very much, Tanya.
Thank you.
Commander Latin, we really appreciate everything you do. Speak up, Ron, you're gonna have to yell. Oh, okay.
And if I may add, Mayor, that the village will be passing policy administratively that will mirror the state as far as mandating a mask and vaccines. That will be coming out shortly. We talked to our employees today, advising of that. We had a nice visit from Dr. Brody, who explained some things to our staff. And so we are working diligently to get the rest of our staff vaccinated. So I'd now like to call up Michael Chavez to give a report on crosswalks and the rain repair. And if you'll come this way, I'll pass the baton.
Mayor, councilors, Administrator Curry. So I don't know if you know or not, but I've been working with DOT on the locations of our crosswalks here on New Mexico 448. We have a few of them that we're going to remove because they started a private property and ended a private property. A couple of them started a wall and ended a wall. So what I have is we had 15 existing to start with. We're going to relocate 2. We're going to remove 4 existing ones, so that'll give us a total of 13. One example would be at the far north end. We're going to leave that one there. We have one in Autumn Lane, which is there by the Harvey Jones Canal. I don't even think anybody knows it's there. So that one we'll be removing. The one here at the rec center, what we're planning on doing there is we're going to move it from Jones and direct it straight across from Priestley. And we'll put a gate at the Growers Market. The one at the store on Metal Arc, that starts on the east end, goes across into a driveway. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that one on East Metal Arc and we're going to angle it across towards that opening where the horse tie-in is. So I will be meeting with Margaret Haynes tomorrow to discuss more. I don't have a final on what she's going to actually allow. It'll be decided tomorrow when we go through here and look at them. But other than that, I mean, she's working very well with us. We're going to give some and hopefully we can take some.
Michael, did you mention that we're probably going to get the school crosswalks put in now?
Yes,
I know
this-
we've got some parents and others here
Yeah,
who
this-
are trying to
this-
get that done.
The school crosswalk, she said, should be addressed hopefully by the end of the week.
Okay, end of
And
the week.
then they will come back in and they'll do the thermoplastic on the rest all at one time. And rain repairs, we're behind, we're trying to catch up. So we're doing what we can do there. We kind of went in and what our plan is when it rains and we have problems like this, we kind of do a triage. First thing we do is we try to get the residents into their homes. Then we look at the worst part of the roads and we try to fix those, make them safe, and we just go from there. So we pretty much have the worst done. Now it's just clean up and dressing up the sides of the road. And I'll stand for questions.
Have questions? Yes, Councilor Murray.
Thank you, Mayor. Michael, I couldn't help but notice it looks like the paint crew has been through the village and pre-marking crosswalks as well. Especially at the old Sear House, it looks like it's going right back in where it used to be. I mean, are we going to be allowed then to move it up to Priestley so that we can make that safer?
I will be meeting with her tomorrow on that.
How about Cabazon? Is there any chance of moving that one so that you're not going across where the pole's at? I know where
Cabazon,
the signs are marked, but that really gets to be dangerous for an equestrian crossing because you've got no room to maneuver a horse around that pole.
Cabazon, we were going to leave for right now because on our plan, we're going to redesign Cabazon Road from Corrales Road to Loma Larga. And in that redesign, we will probably redo the crosswalk at
Okay.
that time.
That'd be great.
I will leave that to the engineer.
Okay.
That's going to be with the new trail.
The
on
new trail.
South side of the road, Sisonic on Sun, so. Okay, any other questions? Well, thank you so much. I really think people need to understand that there's Michael and three other people, and they have been running around town trying to fix all of our roads and everything after the rain. So we really appreciate it. Thank you. Oh, you need your.
Next, we have two presentations from Aaron, and we're going to do one now and one later. I'm going to ask Aaron to discuss our capital projects that are outstanding right now and talk about the delays that we've experienced with the state and identify the specific projects.
Thank you, Ron. Madam Mayor, councilors. So as Ron was mentioning, we're going to be going through our ICIP process again later tonight and hopefully voting on a resolution September 14th with our priorities. We've been through this process once before as a council. And what I'm here to talk to you about tonight is actually last year's ICIP and the monies that we were awarded from those capital appropriation funds, and how we're kind of in that same boat we were a year ago, where the state is coming around and saying, we'll get these grant agreements to you soon, with big air quotes. So as of right now, we still have not had any money swept or had any money pulled away. We're still expecting $50,000 for wastewater bypass and collection systems, the $40,000 for animal services, vehicles and equipment, the $100,000 for the Corrales facility paving reconstructions and renovations, the $200,000 for a fire facility construction, $75,000 for the Thompson fence line sagebrush connection trail, $141,000 for public building renovations, $40,000 for planning and zoning, vehicle equipment and purchases, the $243,500 for the West Meadowlark Lane Trail construction, that's Meadowlark Phase 2. And then finally, the $50,000 for the sign reflectivity that we were awarded. So that's a total of $939,500. Again, you'll hopefully be seeing them very soon. We were supposed to have these grant agreements by the end of this month. So at the very soonest, it'll be September 14th that we'll be able to vote on these and approve them. But again, we have been getting kind of mixed or delayed messages from the state about when these grant agreements will be coming through. So those are all pending, but I can stand for any questions.
Have any questions for Aaron about this? Yes, Councilor Walton.
Yes, Aaron, is there any indication that this year that money might be swept?
Not so far. Again, you know, the kind of standard canned response we've been getting from the DFA so far is, oh, we're working from home, just give us a little more time. So we weren't expecting them. I mean, we get approved during the during the legislative session. We without, you know, we would only ever get that money before, or I'm sorry, after the new fiscal year starts. So that was in July. So we're kind of in that timetable when we should be getting it. But usually we have some information by now about when we're getting those agreements, but we just have been getting crickets so far.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Well, we're looking forward to getting the money and spending the money on all these. Thank you very much.
Try that one. It should be on. Try it.
Okay, never mind. Now we know what to get him for Christmas.
Yes. Now we know what next year's ICIP money should be for.
Yeah.
I just wanted to report on our electric charging stations. The mayor and the village are committed to becoming as green as possible, and these charging stations are part of that. We get a grant, or we have the opportunity to apply for a grant from PNM Last year, we applied. We thought we were in pretty good shape to receive some money. And instead of awarding it to us, they awarded it to Cuba. And that seems odd, but we're still pursuing it as aggressively as you would hope that we would be. Not only the charging stations, but continuing to develop the Green Village concept. Also, I want to report that the 50th anniversary parade is scheduled for September 26th. But preceding the 50th anniversary parade, we're going to have another parade, a pet parade. So we're going to have contiguous parades on the 26th. So get your parade party hats on and get out to the parade. One of the things on the 50th anniversary parade, we always get a lot of politicos who like to participate in our parades because we have a lot of dedicated voters down here that they like to show off to. But we like to focus this year on our own local past and current politicos. All the village councilors that are here now, plus anyone that we can find from the past that would like to participate in the parade, be them a village councilor or a former mayor. So if you know of any of those, you might just alert them that this is coming, and it's a good chance for us to recognize them and celebrate them for their services that they gave to the village. But that'll be on September 26th. Lynn Sieverts will be organizing it, and we intend to proceed with it. Keep our fingers crossed if we don't have any more mandates or limitations coming from the state.
They have a choice of being either at the pet parade or the.
Yeah, that's my question.
I think that's an option.
So I think there will be some organizing meetings and we'll be getting information out so people will know. But again, really, it is a focus on local organizations. So we're hoping that every local organization will, you don't have to be a big organization, you and your best friend, it doesn't matter, but we're hoping to get a local flavor and have everybody participate in that parade.
And then the last thing I would like to report on is that the farmers market last weekend set an all-time record. They had over 3,700 visitors to our farmers market, so growers market, excuse me. So that's very nice, and congratulations to the growers market and all the vendors and all the good, healthy food that went out the door. That's my report, Mayor.
Great. This is the meeting where the reports from the boards and commissions are included in your packet. Do any of the counselors have questions regarding that? Okay, all right, so, sorry, I'm gonna have to do it this way, I guess. So we're not hearing any questions, we're gonna move on to the counselors forum. This section is for information purposes only, not for discussion. To inform the governing body of an issue concern that would not be addressed on the agenda during the business session. Any of the counselors have anything they would like to speak to? Counselor Murray and then Counselor Knight.
Thank you, Mayor. This goes to Ron because I wanted to ask him, we seem to had some confusion this past week with Big Sky Productions in their filming and some of the permitting that was allowed, but it seems that maybe we should be putting together a packet to hand out to these film production crews that have all the regulations and all the hoops they have to jump through so that we don't run into misunderstandings that happened over on Priestley Road with blockades on drives, on the mailboxes. You know, it seems to me that maybe there were mistakes made on both sides by both us and the film production. So if we could just maybe take a look at that and correct that and make sure we don't tread on people's rights and so forth. And the other question along with that too is, and pertaining to the regulations, I'm a little concerned that the setback was waived on that property on the backside near that fence in the garage. It seems to me that maybe that might have been a fire violation because if we're intruding on that setback, we might be preventing our fire department from being able to get around in the backside of that if there were ever a problem. So I'd like to see a little bit more control over those regulations to make sure that we don't inhibit the film crews, but at the same time, if they follow everything that we're asking them to do.
Those are all good points, Counselor. And one of the things that Aaron has addressed and we've addressed together is that we were surprised, and we've made it clear to them that if that happens again, they won't be allowed to operate. But to your first point, I think having a packet or refining what we have as a way of permit applications, we are in the process of doing that, and that's a good idea. We accept that.
Yeah, I was just gonna bring up the same thing about making sure that if a movie company comes in, that we know about it in advance and let people that it's going to affect, let them know in advance too. But it sounds like you're getting on that, so I just wanted to bring that up. I've gotten a note from a constituent about it, so. just wanted to
And it
ask.
normally is. I will say we've had lots of people billing in the village, and they almost always do it correctly. This one, we had a problem, and made it clear that it isn't, we're not going to allow it anymore. But I think they will cooperate, because Big Sky, the filming is moved to Rio Rancho, and who wouldn't want to have our beautiful Sears house and other things? So if they follow the rules, we hope that'll work. Are there any other counselors who wish to speak to any issue? All right, I'm going to move on to the Corey Lenos Forum. Yes.
Sorry.
Oh, sure, Zach.
Oh, hold on. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
One thing I'd like to bring up, we have a very equestrian-friendly community, and we have a young lady from for us named Estella, and our horse Freddie, who were national champions in Oklahoma City just recently.
Okay.
Arabian Youth National Championships. She won first place in the half Arabian regular working 100 champion division, and also placed top 10 in 4 other divisions. I just wanted to bring that to the attention of
Thank you, Counselor Burkett. That's great. The next section, we're going to move on to the Coriolanus Forum. This section is for information purposes only, not for discussion and debate. To inform the governing body of an issue or concern that would not be addressed on the agenda during the business session. There is a 3-minute limit. So Bon Bagley, come on up.
Good evening. I'm Bon Bagley. I live in Colorado West. I'm with the Equestrian Advisory Commission. I just want to thank all of you for being supportive of the horse community. In our public safety endeavors, which we've been working with the master plan for 4 or 5 years, and it looks like it may come together. So thank you to Public Works, the mayor, and the councilors and staff for supporting us. And please remember that the equestrian community has been an absolutely vital part of this village since its inception, and we hope to be included in the parade.
Well, of course.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Kurt Flora and Suzanne Huff Flora.
Mayor, councilors, last month I was here. Why would we mute? Okay. Yeah, last month I was here. I wanted to expose the village corruption. I'm going to do it again this week or this month. Last month it was the meeting minutes didn't reflect the truth. The last month the village in planning and zoning was supposed to work with the MRGCD on all this. Well, you know what last month's corruption I was exposing with the falsified documents that we received, the extortion of money that we received. Well, here's some more of it for this month. Under resolution 16-006, it is that we would have 3 times to correct any problems with a plat before there's a resubmittal of the plat. We were given 1 time before our surveyor was charged $1,000 after 1 mistake. Okay. Under 1886, you have 3 times to fix the problem before there's a charge. Under 1887, you have 3 times to fix the problem. That's preliminary, you have 3 times. Final, you have 3 times to fix the problem before there's a $1,000 charge. It says right here on 16-006, it says, unless otherwise indicated in the subdivision regulations. That means you have to read the subdivision regulations, and the subdivision regulation states that you have 3 times to fix a plat. We are the only ones in Corrales that were forced to do a resubmittal on our application and forced to pay an illegal fee on this. That's crazy. We should have been given 3 times to fix the problem. We also, they have 35 days to come to us and tell us if there's something that needs to be done on the plat. They did not come to us. Then they have 60 days before it's brought to the commission. The plat is brought to the commission to be approved. Well, they passed their 35 days. They passed their 60 days, but they don't feel like, you know, and it says right here that our plat should have been approved on demand. We demanded our plat to be approved. It was, they passed their 60 days. They don't care if they passed their time limit. But if we passed our time limit, it's a big thing. So they had 60 days. They passed their time limit. Our plat should have been approved. This has been going on for 3 years, ladies and gentlemen. 3 years we've been trying to get our property subdivided. In the beginning, we should have been able to do what's called a summary plat, move a lot line and do a one-time split. They forced a preliminary plat on us, costing us $1,000 more doing that. Okay, we should have been, that should have been a summary plat, not a preliminary plat. It's just on and on and on and on. The corruption goes on and on and on.
Thank
We
you
are
for your-
really tired of it.
Thank you for your input, Mr. Huffman.
Okay, and you know where we're headed. Thank you very much.
Mary Boliak?
Hi, thanks for having me, having this session where we can speak what we need to speak. I appreciate the counselor and the mayor's time. I am a resident of Priestley Road, and you got my email, I assume, that had contained pictures of the recent invasion and occupation of the Disney film production in our neighborhood. I describe it that way because it really was quite dramatic. I hope you had a chance to look at all of it. I'm not going to go over it. Thank you, Councilor Murray, for recommending that I come and speak tonight. To sum up, the film company showed up a week ago Sunday, and started constructing a structure on the Sears House property whose home they are lending to film this production. I called the clerk on Monday to find out what's going on. And he said they're meeting Monday afternoon to go over the permit. So they started work before the permit was granted. In our own laws, and if this is what they were granted, they were allowed, if they were allowed to block the roads, driveways, and access to homes from the length of Priestley Road in Corrales, which terminates at a dead end, and Corrival Road, all the way to its termination at a cul-de-sac and dead end. If the village allowed this blockage, the film company was to submit along with their permit, signed forms from each property owner 300 feet from those 2 sites. There were 2 filming sites. They did not approach us. No information, absolutely none from the film company. So the permit was granted without those documents in place. Work was begun and then they showed up. The trucks, the cars, everything. They used Priestley Road, Corrival Road, the complete length of those roads as a back lot, basically. I mean, it was like the state fair, Burning Man, I don't know how to describe it. It was really something. They had a vending truck outside our house. They had an electric cable extending the length of our property to this vending truck place. Trucks were not dropping off and picking up. They were dropping off and then parking for 14 hours into 1:30 at night where the filming was happening and the lights were in the street, on and on. My question is, what can council really do to we can firm up the laws? I appreciate your suggestion, Murray, about Mr. Murray, about a packet. But what bothers me the most is that we called every, I believe local, I called every local entity that I could to get something done, including the police, the clerk, anyone at the office. At one point, they camouflaged our mailbox with leaves and things that you put over ammunition and stuff. I couldn't find my mailbox. That's a federal offense. Okay, this is what out of control. What bothers me the most is no one responded from the village. The police did come 2 times. Yes, and we appreciated that very much. They seemed to be under the assumption that it was okay. Everything that was going on was okay. I think that the problem basically is that if you cannot rely on the film company's word of mouth that everything is okay, the residents have been notified, everyone's cool with it, we weren't.
Understood. Thank you very much. Appreciate your coming forward, and I think you can tell from earlier things it's not going to happen again. So thank you. It's not going to happen again. Thank you very much for coming forward.
I do also want to know how much money was paid to the village by Disney. That's a question that I would like the council to review.
Certainly.
Because our laws are important and they mean something, and they're there for a reason. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, we're going to, I don't have anybody else signed up for the Coriolanus Forum, so we're going to move on to the consent agenda.
One more date over here. Was it the sheet that was outside in the hall?
For the Coriolanus sign up, I only have 3 people. I do have people underneath different items.
Oh, okay.
Your name?
I'm Celeste.
Oh, yes, I have you under item number 4, which is the consideration action and option to purchase the Coons property. Is that where you meant to be?
Yeah, this is my first time here.
Okay, no, that's fine. That's fine. I just want to make sure. We don't want to skip anybody, but okay, thank you. So on to the consent agenda. All matters listed under the consent agenda are considered to be routine by the village council and will be enacted by one motion. There will not be separate discussion of these items. If discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. The one item on the consent agenda is the approval of minutes for July 20th, 2021, the regular council meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
Mayor,
Yes, sir.
let's pull that for a second because I do have a slight correction I think needs to be
That's
made.
okay. Normally what we do is we get a motion in a second, then we have discussion and we
Okay.
can amend. So can I say a motion
Yes,
then?
yeah,
Okay,
I'll
thank you.
make a
And
motion to approve.
second?
Second.
Okay, thank you. And now we have discussion, which I guess we have a correction.
Yes, Mayor, I think it is under item 5, consider an action approval of resolution 2124. The vote says motion carried by unanimous vote, yay 3, no 2. I think we need to remove unanimous.
Unanimous probably is not the appropriate word there. So, Aaron, are you making that correction for us? Okay, so with that correction, are we able to pass the minutes? I'm going to take a voice vote on this. Counselor Parker?
Yes.
Counselor Lucero?
Yes.
Counselor Knight?
Yes.
Counselor Murray?
Yes.
Counselor
I'm
Waldman?
abstaining, I was not at the meeting. I was
sorry.
absent from the meeting.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you very
How about-
much. And Counselor Burkett?
Yes.
Good for you. Okay. Let's move into an item that I know nobody has any interest in tonight. That's number 1 on old business. This is consideration, action, and approval of ordinance 2106. This is an ordinance amended sections 1832 through 1845 and repealing section 2423 of the Village Code to provide zoning and permitting regulation for the growth, sale, production, and use of recreational cannabis pursuant to the Cannabis Regulation Act of 2021. We are first going to hear from our counsel, Randy Audio.
Thank you, Mayor, councilors, Corlenos. What we've been hard at work at was trying to make sense of the mess that we've been discussing in past meetings. And that is of having a very short period of time to do important legislation for the village, given the fact that we don't have final state regulations and that permits for growing marijuana are going to start to be issued or applied for on September 1. So that's why we're here tonight. And what we did is we took everybody's comments, we took all our input, we made modifications to the original proposal. You'll see on the agenda tonight, there are 3 versions. One is the original red line, a second, and then what we called a clean version. Corey's gonna walk you through in a minute what we found after another read of the clean version to correct. We will then take that in this meeting. We'll let you know what those 3 changes are. We'll introduce a clean substitute bill, and that will be our beginning point for action tonight. I want to stress there have been many comments and many people are very concerned about this use occurring in close proximity to their homes in A1 and A2 areas in the community. We had action taken by the legislature this year that did not give us opt-out options. When a law was passed like this for recreational marijuana in Colorado a few years ago, counties actually had to opt in. They had to vote to opt in to allow the growth, sale, and so forth of marijuana. That doesn't exist here. It applies to all of us. It is now a legal, agricultural, and commercial use within New Mexico. For the production, the manufacture, the retail sale, and consumption in consumption rooms adjacent to other uses. So that was our starting point. The reason why we wanted to get this legislation in place and was to protect the village from unregulated location of these uses and unregulated manner in which they were begun. We've included many regulations in this ordinance that regulate the location of grows, the control of odor through required ventilation and scrubbing systems. We've done setbacks, we've done sound, we've done barrier walls and sound mitigation. Without passing this ordinance tonight, we would have none of those. Does that mean this is the best ordinance ever? It's perfect? No. We can come back as more is revealed about how this business is going to occur. We have no idea at the present time how many people will apply, how many applications the state will see for this area. So we will be able to come back and amend this as time goes by to fix those things that we can make better. But marijuana is legalized in New Mexico now, and we cannot change that. For purposes of marijuana, it is an agricultural use. When it's grown in large quantities, the state calls it a commercial use. However, it is clearly agricultural in the sense that all agricultural uses are commercial because people can sell their crops. Anything that's raised on agricultural property within the state of New Mexico, across the country, can then be sold and processed and sold on that property. So we are, in our community, we have A1 and A2 zoning for the vast majority of it. That's why we're creating these distance requirements and buffers to try to isolate large grows from residential areas, but we cannot prohibit them. We cannot do something that is inconsistent with state law that allows the grows to occur in agricultural areas. So with that, I want Corey to go through the few changes that we have on this final bill, and Aaron will pass out a copy to you. But for the public record, that's why we're reading it in. They're very small changes that are essentially typos that we observed that had to be fixed after all of the red line versions were accepted. And we'll obviously stand for questions, but I think there'll probably be some public hearing that
Yes,
folks want to have comments.
yes.
Yes, yes. So this is
Oh,
the
there is
red line.
two.
This is the code.
Okay.
Good evening, counselors and mayor. My name is Corey Strife. I'm an associate of Randy's. And so I just wanted to draw the attention to those essentially typos in the ordinance, which I personally must apologize for. It was my oversight in trying to make some uniformity. And so on page, it would be 3 of the ordinance, which is going to be section 1829, that's labeled definitions. Your definition, which is cannabis product, it used to be within the village ordinance considered a cannabis derived product. We altered that to be cannabis product just to conform with what the state has defined. And in so doing, a hyphen was not removed. So this amended version will have that hyphen deleted just for cleanliness sake. The next change is going to be on page 6. This is going to be in section 1835H, which is going to be our historical area. It is explicitly prohibited to have a cannabis, a commercial operation that's going to be your growing, your manufacture, and so on and so forth. That has not changed. However, there was a misstep on my part under subsection F, where we will have deleted, in fact, the section that says that a cannabis permit must be approved by the Corrales Planning and Zoning Commission, because that gave some sort of an inference that you would in fact be able to have a retail sale in the historic zone, which is in fact not the case. So there's simply a deletion on that subsection F to clarify that you may not have a commercial use for cannabis in the historic zone. And then the final change is on the very last, the second to last page, and that's going to be section 1845H 2A. Sorry, no, that's a note for right after this. So it's actually 1845H3. There was a minor oversight. I inserted an additional section to create those noise buffers as we had discussed in the prior meeting. And in so doing, we actually had to insert an additional letter. So our amendment is now that 1845A through C, as opposed to section 1845A and B. So just a minor adjustment there. But that referenced section prior, I wanted to draw attention to because we did get some additional guidance from the state in terms of regulations before we had been discussing about how we didn't know whether the chicken or the egg came first. And unfortunately, the guidance that came down from the state is that we are going to have to issue zoning approval prior to a licensee getting granted their license. So the conflict is going to be in section 1845H2A, where in the previous version, we have required that the cannabis related activity be appropriately licensed by the state prior to the issuance of a permit. I do not have a fix for that at the moment, but I wanted to bring it to the council's attention so that we can have a discussion and see what we can do about getting that amended.
Okay. And you're saying you don't really have an idea about how we might do that?
Mayor, to be honest, the first thing that comes to mind is to require all of the same documentation that the licensee is going to need to provide to RLD to ensure that they have their ducks in a row. That's not going to guarantee that they will be granted the license. The secondary measure is to require a follow-up after the permit approval to ensure that they in fact do have the license. But that's sort of an after the fact, and hopefully Randy can clarify what those ramifications may be.
Okay, thank you, Corey. Did you want to speak to this? Yes.
We believe the cart before the horse. We typically under medical cannabis approval process, the application is filed with the state, and then there is a review and zoning certification is required. Thank you, Aaron. You're amazing. You need longer arms though, probably. So the state now is switching that and saying you have to have an approved zoning before the application is filed, which I'm not even sure. I think what Corey said was exactly right. We would have to see everything that they're going to submit to the state. They're going to have to prepare their application, give it to us, and we approve zoning on it or not before they go to the state for their actual license. Because otherwise we won't know actually what they're applying for. It's rather nonsensical, but this is going to be a moving target, but I think that is the best amendment, to state that they will have to include in their application for a zoning clearance with us, all of the information they are submitting to the state for their application to receive a permit.
Okay, and Councilor Murray, what we thought we might do would be to hear from the public, and then we could have extended conversation with our
Okay,
council.
good. I was just more curious about the new
Yeah,
situation.
that just happened, today, so. So I do have some folks. One thing I wanted to say, maybe Randy, you're maybe not finished yet. I don't want to cut you off.
No, I was just gonna, I just didn't know if you were finished with me.
No. So what happened was we did receive letters from various folks in town, and all of those were forwarded to our clerk, who sent them all to all of the counselors. So we want everybody to know that the council and myself have received all your letters. And we also have some people who would like to speak tonight to this. So the first person I have up here is Bob Eichhorst. And again, we've got 3 minutes, so please go ahead.
Madam Mayor, councilors, this ordinance is fatally flawed. You stuck a weed ordinance inside of a weed ordinance. And it appears the village wants to be able to ticket people for having weeds in their yard without having any discussion. That's in the opening paragraph. You have a noise ordinance with no definition. We have a noise ordinance that doesn't work anyway. You stuck a odor ordinance in there without definition, and you put a vibration ordinance in there without definition. The setback, okay, by definition, an intense agricultural is me. I have a pasture for my cows. I irrigate from fence to fence. By your definition, that's intensive irrigation, intensive agriculture, which now demands a 25-foot setback on all 4 sides of my property. If my neighbor takes a 25-foot setback on each side, she'll have 10 foot of pasture. I'll be damned if I'm going to give up 25 foot of my land. There is a situation called inverse condemnation. And if the village thinks they can go around taking land from everybody in this village, they better be prepared to buy that land, because that's inverse condemnation, taking away the right of the people to use their property. As far as the marijuana, I'm against it. I think it's a very flawed ordinance. It may have been written by an attorney, but it looks like it's very amateurishly written. It should not pass tonight. It should not pass and then say, oh, well, we'll fix it later. Later never happens. I've been there, I've seen it. Later never happens. Nothing will ever get fixed if this thing passes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eichhorst. John L. Young.
Madam Mayor, council members, John Young. Some of you guys know me, some of you guys don't. If you don't, we need to get together. I'm representing the small farmers in the community. We're so happy and proud about our agricultural background, right? Since ladies, I didn't mean that. Humans started farming in here. This has been our agricultural land. I'm since closed all my restaurants. I'm doing farming. I'm really happy doing that. But But I keep seeing our land going away because nobody can afford to not sell their land. You have vast, stretches of agricultural land that are just putting $1 million homes on it. I think pot and cannabis in general could save that land. And I think that not regulating it, not to be only commercially zoned and not in, 90%, we were just talking about how many people were at the growers market. Every single one of those vendors is on private land. They are not in commercially zoned areas, and they depend on that income. But what if they could add another high value crop to that? It doesn't mean that every single person that is going to apply to the cannabis grow is going to be growing, 7,000 plants and have a big metal building and huge lights and all that other stuff. There's lots of people that I'm going to apply September 1st. And for the small growers, small business grow, which is 200 plants and less, which I believe could take our farm to another level. We're doing permaculture and we're trying to do things right. And we want to, extend on that. We do classes, we do all kinds of other good stuff. And we want to bring that further. And having that cash crop, if we want to just call it a crop, like the gentleman said, it's an agricultural crop. If we could have one hoop house with 100 pot plants in it, I'm not for or against casual use of marijuana. I know it saved my wife's life during breast cancer. That's the only reason I know about it. My kids use it, but I kept telling them, no, but kids. But at some point, I think that we're at the precipice of Corralis's agricultural future. We're already making wine in residential areas. That's an intoxicating substance, just like pot, in a residence. And they're actually allowed to partake in that substance at that residence. Then we don't even know the rules yet. September 1st, they're going to come out. But we have no idea. And I want to be able to, my grandchildren can take over that farm and not have to sell the entire property because it's worth too much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Young. Fred Hashimoto.
Mayor and councilors, I am very much opposed to having high-tech commercial cannabis growing structures in residential areas, which comprise most of the village. I have a very good friend in Colorado who grew up in Corrales and with whom I speak weekly. He went to school in Colorado and has a master's degree in agricultural management and commodities. For a decade, he has been involved with cannabis growing in Colorado, and for years he has been managing hands-on intensive cannabis growing in a converted warehouse in Colorado Springs and in a 6,000 square foot greenhouse in Pueblo. He says that cannabis growing creates significant odors, which can be very annoying. Colorado's basic approach to this has been to restrict commercial cannabis structures to industrial zones or to wide open spaces. Odor is a known issue. Googling, quote, cannabis growing odors, unquote, yields almost 10 million results. Intensive cannabis growing is also resource, especially water and electricity intensive. His facilities have been burglarized, although surrounded by chain link fences, lights, security cameras, barbed wire, bars on windows, etc. This friend, who knows Corrales well, he grew up here, and the industry well, does not believe that intensive cannabis growing is appropriate in Corrales neighborhoods, and neither do I. On my acre of land, residential structures cover about 3,000 square feet. I could easily put a 6,000 square foot cannabis growing greenhouse on my lot with plenty of space to spare. No problems with lot coverage or setbacks. If my neighbor complains of a skunky odor wafting over to his property, I could cite ordinances stating that those are just part of, quote, reasonably, unquote, doing business. However, there are many reasons why I would not intensively grow cannabis in my backyard, not the least of which is I would not want to offend him with noxious smells, decreased quality of life, and decrease in his property value. Conversely, I wouldn't want him to put a 6,000 square foot greenhouse on his property. Perhaps one way to avoid that happening to me and my neighbor, and to most neighbors in residential areas, is to have cannabis growing structures setbacks at least 100 feet. Thereby, moderate to large greenhouses won't fit on most A1 lots. The rationale for such a feet setback is odor abatement. Some suggestions on revising the ordinances might include: 1, no smell is detectable on surrounding properties. 2, at least 100-foot setbacks for cannabis growing structures. 3, deletion of ordinance lines which minimize, 15 more seconds, minimize nuisance effects as reasonable for the business. Intensive cannabis growing is orders of magnitude different from growing tomatoes, apples, hay, etc. on the ground. Instead of plants interspersed in an open field, intensive cannabis growing concentrates many hundreds of plants in a few thousand square foot structure, concentrating, among other things, noxious odors. Please protect Corrales neighbors from these noxious odors and all that come with the structure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Sabine, is that Isley? Sorry, I knew I was going to not do that right.
My name is Sabina Isley. Thank you for having me. It's my first time speaking. I've been in this village for a couple of years, and I just would like to say that I'm not for or against pot, but I think we have a small village. We don't have agricultural big land. We are always next to a neighbor in this village. And I find it a very unkind neighbor if one would build a greenhouse and run that 24/7 with fans, with lights and odor. I think that would be a very unkind neighbor. And I think since this is a local decision that really at the end affects every person in this village, it needs to come to a vote for every person in the village and not just by a few. I think every citizen in this village needs to be informed. There needs to be a date set, and everybody needs to say yay or nay. I think that's everybody's right here. That's pretty much all I have to say. Like I said, I'm not for or not against, but we all need to be good neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you. Agree. Randy, could you, I think it'd be good if you could respond to a couple of things. First of all, is this a local decision? Why are we doing this now? And also, I think to address some things that were said regarding the weeds, which I think is important for people to understand where that language came from and what its intent is. So I'll let you get started. Thank you.
Certainly, Mayor. We, in our form of government, we are essentially preempted by the state that we are a part of. We are a creature of the state. Our village receives its jurisdiction and its authority through the state of New Mexico. When the state legislates and your elected officials vote and pass a law, we are subject to that law. So we first don't have a right of referendum to change state law to exclude it from our village. We don't have that option. All we can do is work with it in the best way we can for our village. We don't have a right of referendum in New Mexico to negate what the state legislature has passed and the governor has signed. We have to work through that system to change laws. For better or worse, it just is the system. The second thing, and I'm sorry, Mary, you rattled off about 3 things.
I did rattle off about 3 things. Well, first of all, there was some concern about the language regarding weeds. That's
Thank you.
Environmental nuisances, section A.
The reason we placed that in there was to differentiate between uses that could be a nuisance of agriculture and saying that normal agricultural uses do not create a nuisance. If it's done in the normal way that agriculture is done in a reasonable manner to following general agricultural standards, it's not a nuisance. And that includes the growth of marijuana. But what can be a nuisance is if you do it irresponsibly, negligently, or illegally, then that can be a nuisance. The reason the weeds come in there is because the state wanted to differentiate what is not appropriate to grow on a piece of land. These are noxious weeds. We do not have to regulate that. We could strike that from our ordinance, but it helps us define what we can regulate that is a nuisance. So it isn't a few weeds in your yard, it's your next door neighbor who has an entire field full of Russian thistle that every time the wind blows in the fall, it ends up in your yard. That's the type of weeds that are noxious weeds. So that's why it's there. Do we have to leave it there? No, but that was the rationale that the state had when they included those suggestions to regulate nuisances and make clear that the growth of marijuana, if it's done as a normal use, is not a nuisance.
So that language came from the Cannabis Regulation
Was it straight
Act?
from?
Not directly, no. So this language was actually adopted from other successful nuisance ordinances, recognizing that typically the growth of marijuana, particularly in something like a greenhouse, has a tremendous potential to be a nuisance if left unchecked or unregulated.
Okay.
So this was designed with those nuisances that a marijuana greenhouse.
Okay. The other things that were mentioned were noise, odor, vibration, and setback. And, you know, those are things that people are very concerned about. And I know that we've tried to put them in our ordinance. And there's concern that, you know, it's not specific enough to really enforce on. Do you have a
Well,
response for that?
noise, odor, and those things are subjective things, and they are always very difficult. If you live next to a dairy or you live next to a farm that raises a lot of pigs, you know that odors are subjective things, and they can be a problem if it's not that property isn't well maintained. So we have put in definitions to the best of our ability. It ultimately, when you're enforcing on anything like this, will fall to a judge to interpret, and it's going to be the reasonable man standard is what is being done on that property unreasonable. The gentleman that stated that noise ordinances are difficult to enforce is absolutely correct. Standards are incredibly difficult to enforce in the area of noise. One of his statements that I wanted to address, we're looking to ensure it isn't the intent of this governing body to state that a person that's running cows on a piece of land is going to have a 25-foot setback from anywhere. What that's meant to address is when you're doing an intense agricultural use in a greenhouse that could have the visual, the noise, and the odor impacts upon the neighbors. So Corey's checking to make sure we have adequately defined what we're talking about as an intense agricultural use.
Right, and I was looking at that section. It's 7 setback requirements, and it does say no new structure shall be permitted or placed closer than 25 feet to any existing residential structure or any abutting lot. Front setbacks shall be no less than 25 feet. That's what it is now. Rear setbacks no less than 10, except in the case of intensive agriculture, in which all setbacks shall be no less than 25 feet.
So we have to ensure that what we're defining as intensive agriculture is what's occurring within a structure for either growing marijuana or another agricultural use in a large structure.
Correct.
So we'll make sure we do that.
All right. So that actually was the end of public comment on this. So I think now we're moved back to questions. Councilor Murray, I think you had your hand up.
Yes. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Yes, and I was concerned about the first portion of that, about the weeds too. But are we creating a loophole for cannabis when we say agricultural uses when reasonably conducted in accordance with common agricultural practices. Would that not be considered a loophole for a cannabis production?
I don't think so, because if what reasonable production would be following our ordinance. So if you're producing whatever you wish to within that intense grow in a building, if you're doing it following our guidance in our ordinance, then it would be a legal use. If you don't, then we could enforce on it.
Well, also in number C, where you talk about all disagreeable or obnoxious odors, we are going to put in place, at least it looks like, some kind of filtering to mitigate those odors, but we already have ordinances for animal control already that they have to maintain their property and they cannot allow flies or any other nuisance like that to accumulate. I'm just a little concerned that this could be used, and maybe you addressed that. I'm afraid that it could be construed and used by somebody against a neighbor who may not be raising cannabis. And like you say, the weeds, one man's weed is another man's flower. So basically.
Well, actually, there is a specific list of noxious weeds under state law that are illegal. For example, Russian thistle that will then be in everybody else's yard in the fall season. So that is what it would be limited to, is noxious weeds. I'm not an advocate of weed ordinances, don't get me wrong, but we're trying to differentiate between what is appropriate agricultural uses and what is a nuisance.
Okay. I also, in one of the in the definitions, I have a concern that anytime we're referencing the Cannabis Regulation Act, I'd like to see the NMSA 1978 language added after that, so that it can direct the person to the state statute which that is referring to. Because right now, when I first looked at this, 26-2C-2, whatever, didn't mean anything to me. And the Cannabis Act didn't mean anything to me until after I had to go back into the state statutes or the special session and find language that said, oh, this is the Cannabis Regulation Act here.
Point taken. I think if we reference that these definitions are taken from that act and cite that act at the beginning of the definitions would be sufficient.
Okay. Also, this is a what if. I know they talked about the cannabis being a agricultural product. Could we restrict it from the A1 and A2 zones and only limit it to the commercial or in-cod area in the village?
Because it is an agricultural use, our village is unique. We have very limited zoning. We have very few zones. There is not adequate commercial zoning in Corrales to do any large-scale agricultural uses, that unless it's A1 or A2. It doesn't exist.
Okay. Also, could we limit the size of a greenhouse to say 500 square feet?
Well, we've limited it by the size of because of the setbacks, we've put, that is a limitation. We already have our limitation of buildings, and we already have the total built area of lots. So those are the ways we already regulate it, and we've increased that by the 25-foot setbacks from every side. So if you're on an acre, it naturally reduces the size of the building.
Well, I'm thinking of maybe a larger parcel where that may not apply. It may be on more than an acre, and with a 35% lot coverage, you can put a lot of building on a lot.
It's true, and we have not thus far regulated it that way. If you're suggesting a maximum size?
Yeah, just for greenhouse, I mean, you could have multiple greenhouses. We just limit the greenhouse to 500 square feet.
Well, I don't think we would have a problem figuring out that aspect. I don't think now's the time to do that, given that we are at the 11th hour and we've gone through 3 drafts already.
Well, I understand, but like you said, it's not perfect, and we can have amendments. Also, I would like to see the setback go to 100 feet, because on certain large properties, even 1,000 feet is not going to be enough to curtail the odor, even if they have a carbon filtration system. Somewhere that odor is going to get out. And we heard from kind of outside the meeting last time from neighbors that existing medical facilities right now smell like, they're terrible. And they live 350 feet away and they're smelling it, day and night. So I would like to see that setback increased as well. And let's see, what else do I go? I think also, I would also like to add that when we talk about active carbon filtration systems, I'd like to add language in there that we mitigate the terpene oil producing compounds to adjacent properties. That way, we're going to have some way of mitigating these things and making sure that they don't go to the adjacent properties and so forth.
I hear you. As I said, given where we're at, we would almost, that's another, those suggestions, if there is council approval of those, would be another rewrite. It'd be very difficult to do floor amendments on much more than we already have. I'm just saying, if we want to revisit this in a quick amount of time, after we got something on the books, we can do that. It's within our authority to revisit this quickly. But I just hesitate adopting widely applying regulations when we haven't thought through them besides the 10 minutes that we're talking about them tonight.
Well, I understand that now. I think that counselors, I think it's up to us to whether we want to pursue this tonight or not. So,
Well, if we don't pursue it tonight, we won't have anything on the books and we will be having no regulation, and that's our problem. And I think that is what people are not understanding, is that far from saying we think this is okay, we're doing what we can under the current law and the guidelines that we've been given to get something on the books that will protect our community. So that is the problem with doing really large setbacks, because then I think we honestly are getting in the way of people's private property rights and their use to their property. And that's why that kind of thing would require, I think, a more careful and thoughtful legal analysis so that we don't wind up in a lot of trouble with unintended consequences. So Councilor Waldman, I think.
Actually, I think Councilor Parker had his hand up first.
Mayor Rowe, councilors, Mr. Audio, can you explain what would happen if we say we will not allow it in the village? My understanding is if we say we will not allow people to grow cannabis in the village, there would be a lawsuit. We would lose the lawsuit and people would be allowed to grow it in the village. Is that a kind of the layman's terms of what would happen?
That is what I would anticipate. I believe there would be people that would desire to grow it within the village, and then if they were prohibited in violation of state law, they could file suit against us, or the state could come to us and say, you are violating state law, and the district attorney or attorney general could file against us.
And so then if that was the case and we did not have anything in the books, then it's kind of a free for all for people to do what they want in terms of growing.
It's an absolute free for all at that point.
So the best protection that the village can do right now is to put something that we all can agree on is not perfect, but something that does start to protect the rights of the people that live in the village, both to do something, but both prevent people the ill effects of those situations. Is that a fair statement?
That is our recommendation, because we have no protection if we don't.
Okay, and my last question, just for clarification, is any regulation that we're doing for the growing of cannabis on here, that is for anything that's grown in Corrales, correct? So in terms of the greenhouse sizes, the greenhouse locations, the setbacks for those, we're not saying that's only for cannabis. We're saying that's for everything that's grown here.
If what we're trying to do is address intense agriculture, which is I think what we're trying to do.
Exactly.
For example, people can grow 12 plants for their own personal use, and we can't regulate it. We can't permit it. It's going to happen if they wish to. And we can't regulate odor. We can't regulate anything else unless it's creating a nuisance. So with our regulation of agriculture, we need to regulate cannabis to the same degree we regulate similar land uses. We can't make cannabis do things that are absolutely not required of anybody else. So that's why we're talking intense agricultural uses like any greenhouse and any large agricultural operation would have to comply with the same types of regulations.
And although I think many of us would agree that cannabis is a different crop than corn, I'm not saying grow corn in a greenhouse because I'm not sure that would be appropriate. But if we say there's a 100-foot buildings or 1,000-foot building setback, 100-foot building setback, that's not just for a cannabis greenhouse, that's for any greenhouse.
That's correct. And that's one of those unintended consequences that would be highly regulatory of the citizens that wouldn't be appropriate.
Councilor Knight, did you have a question? I just want to make sure that you. I did, but I think Bill was ahead of me, so you can go ahead. All right, you're so polite.
Thank you. Just a very quick question. I'm not sure this is working. We have passed in the past year and may pass again conservation easements in the village. These are large parcels of agriculture. Is there any prohibition or anything? I haven't seen anything regarding the growing of cannabis in any of the conservation easement properties that we've approved or may approve in the future. Is there anything that prohibits cannabis growing on conservation easements, either from the state or proposed locally?
I do not think there could be intense agriculture there because there are limitations on building envelopes. So where there's agricultural uses, it's going to be open field agriculture, but there's no prohibition that I'm aware of, nor would it probably be legal that we would prohibit growing openly marijuana.
So to place greenhouses on those properties may be in violation of the conservation easement.
Correct, because it would be buildings on the property outside of the building envelope where the residence is.
Thank you.
Councilor Knight? All righty. I just wanted to make sure in the historical area zone, section 1835, you had said that it is prohibited to grow cannabis in those areas. But there are farms and agriculture going on now in those areas. Couldn't we say that in A1 and A2 that because of cannabis? I'm just trying to figure out. I've only gotten information from people that are against this. So how can we help them get what they want by, instead of just having, trying to get what the state wants? Because it just seems to me that, most people, maybe 75% of people are against having intense growing greenhouses that are filled with cannabis. So is there anything we can do to really limit it besides what we've already done? I mean, can we say it can only be a certain size as far as a greenhouse? Or if it's prohibited in the H zone, where there's still farming going right now, why can't we say it's prohibited because it is a different crop? I mean, what a quandary we're in, because most people I don't think want it, but the state is kind of saying we have to treat it like every other crop. And it really isn't like every other crop. So what can we do to help people that don't want it?
The problem we have is we have unique zoning in Corrales. It's kind of what's made Corrales unique. We're almost entirely small agricultural parcels. That's where our residences occur, is on A1 and A2 agricultural parcels. And that is throughout the village, except for the neighborhood commercial zones that exist. So what we're limited to is how to differentiate between A1 and A2 lots. If we prohibit them in all, we're going to face a challenge and we're going to lose it because we can't prohibit the growth of marijuana in our village, according to state law. So if we prohibit it in A1 and A2, that literally encompasses nearly the entire village.
So couldn't we say that it could only be done in the commercial zone? I mean, there are spots available in the commercial zone.
Well,
Maybe
once
not a
we,
lot, but-
once we apply our distance requirements that we have 200 feet between businesses and 300 feet from schools and daycares within our commercial zone, and then you have our setback requirements, it would severely limit the number of lots that would be available in our core of our village.
And is
Now,
that a
what-
bad thing?
Yeah, if what?
Is that a bad thing?
Yes, it is.
According to state
under
law, According to state law, it is. That's all we can work with. It's not my personal opinion, trust me. But what I would propose we do is, if we believe this is too broad, then we can look for other avenues. It may result in a zone change. Who wants to have areas that are appropriate for cannabis? Which neighbors want that? That's what we'd have to do, is we'd have to put more areas that are appropriate for growing cannabis, and so that there would be adequate areas so that we wouldn't be prohibiting the growth of cannabis.
Okay. I just feel like sometimes it takes a long time to get things changed once we say it's okay. You know, and I just don't want that to happen with this.
I hear you. Oh, the permits are coming out
Right.
on September 1. They can start applying for permits. That's why we're trying to get this done. So if we don't do anything, as we've said, then we have no protection. So it felt the most appropriate to us is that we do a one step, then the retail sales and the manufacturing does not get approved until starting on January 1. So we have time on those to tweak the ordinance. We have to revisit this. I believe this will be back. It isn't going to go on the shelf and we're never going to be bothered by it again. I guarantee you we will be discussing it for the next 8 months at least.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Lucero?
Oh, Zaz.
I'm sorry, Counselor Burkett? Please.
Thank you very much. I just have 3 quick comments I'd like to make. Assumption that this is any other crop, and several of the other counselors have brought it up. But it's not. Then the state's not treating it like any other crop. They are requiring security setbacks, licenses. They don't require those for tomato farms. So I don't think it's fair to ask us to treat it like anything else that's growing if they're not doing that. The second thing I have a question about is, if a daycare can have a setback or a school can have a setback, why can a house with a backyard full of kids not request the same setback to protect their kids from the same thing we're protecting the daycares from? And then finally, it is an issue that agricultural and residential are zoned the same. But I think we need to focus on the residential component of that right now. And it would be my recommendation that we just don't allow it in A1 or A2 zoning. And we deal with the state, and I know that'll have to happen, but maybe it gives us time to sort this out further.
Thank you, Counselor Burkett. Okay, Counselor Lucero?
I just have a couple of questions. Mr. Audio, tell me, just for my clarification and everyone here, what does a yes or no vote tonight mean for this ordinance?
If we vote yes, when someone comes in on September 1 and asks for a zoning certification for a marijuana grow, all these regulations would apply to them, and they would therefore have to comply with those distance requirements we're creating, the filtration requirements we're creating, and all of the other regulations. If we vote no, we have nothing to prevent them from doing that. If they submit a permit application and we say, no, we don't have zoning for you, you can't do it, then they can go to the state or they can go to court. And that's where we're very vulnerable, and then we have nothing. So I don't want to say it as graphically that it's the ostrich approach, but this problem is on our doorstep, and steps to solve it, to me, are wiser than not doing anything.
Thank you, Mr. Adi.
Councilor Murray?
Oh,
I'm sorry, Councilor. No, it's fine. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Just the next question I had was, now, I know we've gotten little to zero direction from the state regarding how we're going to regulate this, right? When those do start coming out, do we have that option to either adopt those regulations or maybe even toughen our regulations? Because I mean, I understand, like, you know, whether you agree with it or not, this wasn't our decision, you know, and we're left having to deal with it and trying to protect our village and the quality of life of the people in it, and work hand in hand with something that was just piled on us. So when the state does figure out what regulation they want, do we have an option to adopt those and maybe even toughen those?
Well, we certainly can. What we won't know from the state is they're going to leave zoning to us. We will have to work within our own means to solve the zoning issues. What we'll look at is they may be limiting the way you can do the uses, the way you can do the grows. But for zoning purposes, it's going to be up to us. What I'm frustrated about is that they didn't have their regulations in place. Now they're saying they're going to have to come to you first, and you're going to have to review it before we'll issue a license. So they're really protecting themselves and making us go first, which is not good, but it is the nature of the beast. And I, you know, you guys are in a tough spot. You've heard many frustrated citizens who are trying to deal with this in a rational way. And it seems that we don't have a good method to get what people want. Councilor Burkett said some important things, but the state didn't choose to regulate it that broadly. Because all of our residences are in A1 and A2, it makes it very difficult for us to separate out A1 and A2 uses. It is a very hard issue for us.
Thank you, Mr. Adi.
I would like to ask you a question because Councilor Burkett raised it. You know, just say no. Well, I think you've been working with the New Mexico Municipal League and state agencies, and I'd just like to have your risk assessment of what would happen to the village if we were to just try to say no to state law.
I don't think we would survive the challenge because it's a law of statewide application. We will be expected to take the tools we have, which is zoning, and if we need to amend our zoning code to create areas of use for this intense agricultural use, we may need to do that. It's not going to be fun. It's not going to be nice, but we may have to do that to separate it from residences. Because right now, our agriculture is our residential zone. It's a tough, tough problem. And I think Councilor Burkett laid it out that really is our option, and Councilor Lucero as well. We either regulate it and do the best we can with it, or we take our chances, and we may wind up with applications in places we don't want them with no regulation.
Right.
They may get approved by a court.
Councilor Murray.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to take my room. Hang on. My hearing piece fell off. Randy, I'm going to ask you a couple of things. One, could we make the approval of a cannabis application conditional upon approval from the state? So if the applicant came to us with all the required paperwork, could we make that conditional based on the state accepting the application as well?
I mean, we will, except we can say that, and that will be the way it functions. Without a license, they're not going to get to go forward. So that, yes, that will happen. However, the state won't issue a license until we approve. So
even if it's conditional?
Well, I mean, we would say it is conditional, you know, unless you get your license, you can't go forward when we do our permitting process. So that will happen, but the state's not going to do the licensure prior to us doing our zoning review.
So I had an interesting conversation with Doug Crosby at the state engineer's office today. And it seems that it really, what we're really going to have on September 1 is we're going to have an application probably from the medical cannabis group because they've already got the facilities in place. They will probably already have the water rights. They're going to be the first ones probably to get approved because just by the fact that they're already established. Mr. Crosby said that at the time, greenhouses or any cannabis establishment has to have a commercial permit. I mean, commercial water rights. They have to have the sufficient water rights to be able to demonstrate that they can draw that water. And one is impairment and invalidity is basically a couple keywords that were told to me about when applying for these water rights and so forth. Yeah, I have a feeling that these applicants who submit their paperwork on September 1, they're not going to see an approval because the state engineer is probably not going to have anything in place unless they can demonstrate they've got the water rights in place. But I think it's the medical cannabis group that we're really going to be worried about because we've already probably got a 6,000 square foot greenhouse already at the north end of the village, and they're going to be ready to go. Is a reasonable assumption?
I think that is very possible. You're absolutely right that they have to get commercial water rights to do any grow. I do not know what that property has, but it was enough to get the medical license. And it would be up to the state engineer to determine if it's adequate for the recreational grow.
Yeah, it was, the way it was demonstrated to me, also talking to Joey Fields, who retired from the state engineer office, that these water rights are for 4 years. So if he applies for 10 acre feet of water rights to be transferred to the property, he has 4 years in which to use that 10 acres. Then he can reapply every 3 years after that to continue if the business is still viable and so forth. But the thing was, you're allowed 10 acre feet and that's it. If you use all that 10 acre feet before the 4 years is up, that's tough. And consequently, these commercial permits or water rights are supposed to be metered, and it is self-governing, basically, or self-reporting by the owner of the property.
That's my understanding as well.
Right, yes, Councilor Tyson. Parker.
Mayor Rowe, councilors, Mr. Audio. I agree with everyone up here is of the belief that we are between the rock and the hard place on there. However, I've seen what happens if there is no zoning in place when people come through and are granted the permit. And a lot of issues that can be avoided will be created on there. And so I'm of the belief that we ultimately don't really have a choice on this matter. And that if we do approve it, we need to use the tools that we are given within the guidelines of the zoning regulations with the setbacks. With the setbacks, I'm fearful that we will then be putting limitations on 99% of the people who are not growing cannabis on their properties. And I'm not sure that's correct. But what I do think is that what we have in there in terms of the smells, I think that's the real protection for the people who are near the growing facilities. I mean, I received multiple emails from people who are indicating 350 yards away, the smells coming across their house to a point where they can't enjoy the property outside. And the setbacks that I think Councilor Murray, although I agree with him, I don't think would solve that problem at all. But if we can put some pretty strict language in here about having scrubbers on the buildings, and I know other jurisdictions, either in Colorado or elsewhere, I'm not sure if you guys have found something, that it's possible to make it very clear that if you have your facility and it's up and running, your neighbors are not smelling your 600 plants inside the greenhouse.
Thank you. May I ask, do we have such language explicitly in this ordinance now, Corey? Okay, could you just guide us to that so that we can look at it?
Yes, Mayor and councilors, thank you. So specifically, we did include this pursuant to our last conversation. So it is in section 1845 under number 3. So the part that's going to be pertinent, particularly to the smell conversation, is going to be subsection A, which is that greenhouses or other structures that are incidental to the production of cannabis or cannabis products. So this is not only going to be greenhouses and grows, but this will also apply to manufacturing. So anything that maybe have more pungent substances for extracting, just thinking ahead a little bit there. That anything that is incidental to the production of cannabis, they shall be equipped with the activated carbon HVAC filtration system. And just to give a little bit of background, the reason why carbon is what has been identified here is that is the industry standard for cannabis growers who are seeking to mitigate their smell. I understand that maybe in Colorado and in some other places, that's not necessarily their intent because they have different laws in place. I think that getting ahead of it by using the industry standard and requiring maintenance of those carbon filtration systems, because again, my understanding is that they have a limited lifespan. So it's not enough to say, install that scrubber and you're good to go. But instead, install the scrubber and keep it up to date, change it as you need it, and your neighbor shouldn't be able to smell it. So it's responsible maintenance on part of the greenhouse, which they should be doing to maintain their air quality. But also, as someone else said, is being a good neighbor. So that is little subsections I and II. So that's the activated carbon filtration systems shall be maintained regularly such that odor abatement remains effective. So if your neighbor's starting to smell it, it means it's time to change your filter. And then next, your cannabis producers shall keep a maintenance record for their filtration systems, which will include at a minimum the filters that are changed. So if you've got multiples in the greenhouse, that it will, if you had to change 2 at a time, they take note of which ones those are. And then the date that it is changed, and then the date that they predict that they're going to need to do that next filtration change. My understanding is it's something like 6 months, but of course that can change depending on how many plants you have and what stage they are in of maturity. So it may be more or less frequent depending on the growth.
And I notice you've got noise buffering panels too in subsection B.
Yes. Yes, and just for a little bit of background on that one, subsection B is that the sound emissions from the property line must be below 85 decibels. 85 decibels is actually the standard nationally that is the hearing damage. So if you're exposed to anything over 85 for prolonged periods of time, you can suffer permanent hearing damage. And so we wanted to make sure that was below that level. So it's not a perfect number, I'll admit it, but your average swamp cooler runs at about 87. So just for a frame of reference, it should be less noisy than your neighbor's swamp cooler, hopefully.
And then the last thing is to Councilor Murray's point, we've got to have a valid permit from the Office of the State Engineer certifying access to water rights sufficient to conduct the activity or activities.
Yes.
Okay. Anybody? Yes, Councilor Parker.
Mayor, road councilors. I'm not good with words. Can you just define what effectively abate means in the legal world?
So to effectively abate would be to mean that you have done the most that you can do. And as Randy had mentioned earlier, it's sort of a reasonable person standard. In this case, because we're dealing with professionals mostly in the circumstance, what would your average professional marijuana grower be doing to be effectively abating that odor? And what that means, and I think you may have been, in fact, the one, Councilor Parker, who mentioned it, that may mean something as simple as not being able to smell it from the property line. And I will address this ahead of time. The reason that that's not in the ordinance right now is because, as Randy had said before, you may have people who are growing their own homegrown cannabis, and we have no jurisdiction to say that they can't do that outdoors. And so it may become very, very difficult to discern whether it's coming from the neighbor who has the greenhouse and the carbon filter scrubbers, or is it coming from the neighbor who's got 12 plants in their backyard adjacent to the property line that we have no say over.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Knight?
Yeah, are there going to be any provisions in here about what happens to people who don't do what they're supposed to do? Like, after 2, if somebody goes out and says, this is louder, or, I'm smelling this, what happens to them? Does the whole place get shut down, or do they get, 1 warning, 2 warnings, and then it's shut down? I think that needs to be in here too.
That is a point well taken.
So
I
they
say,
know exactly
hopefully
what's
Randy
going
has a
on
good
and they
answer to you for
don't.
this.
Hopefully Randy will fly in here.
He'll save me.
Well, with all permitting processes, we have a right to revoke permits if people are failing to comply with permits. And secondly, we can enforce on nuisances. We can report them to the state, so the state licensure may be affected if they're not being a good neighbor and not doing it the way they're supposed to do it. If it's bad enough, we can take them to state district court. So we have all of those tools for any violation of our laws. So we don't need to spell them out here.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand that this law is just one of our ordinances, and many of these same things are covered in other ordinances. But it is clear that any permit, you have a right to revoke it. If it becomes a nuisance, you have some further rights, and if it's really bad, you can take them to court. We can take them to court. Counselor Wolfen?
Yes, we've talked about odor, we've talked about setbacks. The state engineer has responsibility for water, not the quality of the water. My understanding is that most of these growing facilities are not organic. Water goes back into our water table, our aquifer, to be used through our wells throughout the community. Is there any way we can put any kind of restrictions on the recycling of that water to clean that water before back?
You know, Counselor, it's a good question. I think what we are dealing with is the state of agriculture in America. There are two types of agriculture now. There's organic that's coming on and people are starting to do organic grows. But there is, for example, a dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico the size of Rhode Island because of the over fertilization of crops all along the Mississippi River. And it ends up as a dead zone where nothing can live in the Gulf of Mexico. So it's an international, national problem. I don't think we're going to be able to effectively change that for just cannabis growers when all other agricultural users have the ability to use the same fertilizers. So it's another big bite for little old Corrales to take on.
We could take the lead internationally. Take the lead.
The international lead, I really like it.
I'm happy to do that work for you and all.
Councilor Murray?
Oh, thank you, Mayor. Corey, do we know how effective these carbon filters are with greenhouses that have a high humidity? Because in some discussions I've had with constituents, these filters may not be as effective in these greenhouses where you have high humidity needed to keep the plants going and a high flow of air.
Councilor Murray, the easy answer is I don't have a specific number on what percentage of effectiveness it is. My understanding is that as long as it's properly maintained, it's somewhere between 95 and 98% effective. So the vast majority of the odor is controlled simply by having a well-maintained carbon filtration system. And sort of to my point earlier, I think that the large majority of odor that we hear about and smell in our communities is from an improper maintenance or from an irresponsible grower. So I think that as long as we are doing our due diligence and making sure that these growers have those plans in place to be replacing and monitoring the quality of their carbon filtration system, we'll be in a good place, or at least in a much better place than we would without it.
Now, I just want to ask you, because now I'm going to start a sentence with "I assume."
Sure.
We all know what that means. But I'm assuming that when we're dealing with permits that are coming in, then we're going to be checking to make sure that their plan is adequate, that it follows all the rules, and we could do an actual on-site inspection of this to make sure that they've got their scrubbers in place and all of that.
That would be correct.
Okay.
It's commercial in that sense. It's like another business.
Right.
You have the ability to regulate, then you have the ability to inspect.
And we'd also then have like a fire inspection in any of these facilities as well, which is one of our normal requirements.
Yes, and
So-
to that point, there are in fact in those regulations that very charmingly came down at the very last minute, they do go through some very rigorous standards that the applicants have to meet, of which they do require things like a site plan approval from the fire marshal, the fire inspection to ensure that they have a safety plan, that they have their chemical substances, if any of them may be flammable, in a place that is going to be a responsible storage place away from anything like your high-powered lights. So all of those things are required by the state to submit an application for the licensure. So I think by requiring the applicant to give us that documentation at the time that they seek that permit for the zoning clearance, we're doing a good CYA and doing our homework to make sure that they will have had everything in place so that we will be ready for a fire inspection and to do the building inspection, ensure that those scrubbers are in place once they come back to us with that licensure. Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you.
One more question, if I could. So I was reading that the personal use, that the person has to grow it inside the house because it cannot be outside because of security. You can't have odors going next door to your neighbor. I think that he said that it had to be contained within the house itself, if I'm not mistaken.
Councilor Murray, my understanding at this point, and based on the Cannabis Regulation Act, is that a home grower may grow however they desire. The one limitation that was placed on the home grower is that it may be the 6 plants if it's only one individual, 12 plants if it's more than one individual, and it must be concealed. So that doesn't mean inside only. It means that it cannot be, out front with your rose bushes, but it has to be behind a fence or in your backyard where nobody walking by down the street would see it necessarily. So that's my understanding of what the concealed language means, and not indoors.
Even with the drone?
Here, let's not talk about drones. Good God. I think that we could discuss this all night long, but I think it has been pointed out that we probably need to try to move on and make a decision here. So I would entertain a motion at this time. Do I have a motion?
Mayor, road councilors, I'll just stand by my comments and I say I move that we approve the ordinance as it's, let me do this correctly. I move that we approve ordinance number 2106.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. I am going to take a voice vote on this. Certainly.
Before we vote, we're going to have to do the amendment on the issue of the fact that the state said they're going to have us go first on the licensure.
Oh, bless their hearts.
Yes.
All right.
Do you have, go ahead, Corey, with the paragraph and the line and the proposed language.
So the first thing we need to do is we're going to need to take care of an amendment and then we'll go back to the underlying ordinance. Okay, so Corey, do you want to?
And to clarify that what we're voting on is the clean version that we told you with the 3 amendments tonight. That's the substitute bill. And then we have this proposed amendment first, and then
On to the main act.
This is the one.
I'm sorry, Councilor Burkett? The box is talking.
Go ahead, Councilor Burkett.
I'm sorry.
Okay,
Can I ask an amendment-related question?
Yes.
I can't.
I would like to know if we were to amend this and say not in A1 and A2 and pass the bill with that amendment, what would we see as potential consequences and timeframe for such?
we got to get another microphone. Councilor Burkett, while my crystal ball is at home, I believe that there would be a very good argument for an applicant located in A1 or A2 to bring us to court on the basis of a denial because we prohibited it in those zones. What a court's going to do with it, obviously, that's where the crystal ball comes in. I believe the state of New Mexico has made it very clear that we have to treat this like other agricultural products with the limitations that they give us so that we can regulate it more, but it is an agricultural product. I think saying it cannot be located in agricultural zones would not go too far with the judge. And I may be dead wrong, but that's my estimate.
Are we getting ready to get?
And if that's the case, would our current version of the law stand while that litigation was pending?
Our current version of the law that is on the books right now prohibits the growth of marijuana in those zones right now. And I believe it is illegal under the new state Cannabis Regulation Act.
I guess what I'm asking is what we passed tonight, if we could pass it with that amendment, would that stand?
I believe so. We are doing what we believe is reasonable, and I think it has a good chance of standing given what we have in place.
Randy, I think actually Councilor Burkett was asking you if we excluded A1 and A2. and passed it
Not if we exclude A1 and A2. Is that what you're asking, Counselor?
If we were to exclude those, then going through the litigation process, what would stand as our zoning code?
All we have in place right now is the prohibition that we did a few years ago of growing cannabis in any zone except commercial zone, or having cannabis businesses in commercial zones. There's no growing allowed in A1 or A2. And I believe that that is what would be found immediately by a court to be in violation of the current state law.
Thank you.
How are you doing, Corey? Okay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, councilors. Okay, so where we're at is going to be in section 1845. This is going to be in paragraph 2. So A, I propose that we strike that language and change it to require the complete documentation to be provided to the Regulation and Licensing Department.
Okay, is everybody, do you know where we are?
No.
Okay.
Sorry.
I think that's important.
I'll slow down.
Second to the last page, we're looking at section 1845. Yep, we're looking at the latest one that we got with the amendments in the red line. That's correct. So go to 1845, which is the second to the last page. Okay, you want to locate us now?
Yes, okay, so sort of middle of the page, we're looking at paragraph 2, application and fee. Subsection A right now says the cannabis-related activity or activities are appropriately licensed by the State Regulation and Licensing Department pursuant to the Cannabis Regulation Act. We cannot do that, so I suggest that we strike that language and instead replace it with the complete documentation to be provided to the Regulation and Licensing Department.
The complete documentation to be
Provided to the Regulation and Licensing Department.
Okay.
And then there will be at the end, so we right now end at subsection J. Sorry, yes.
He's fast, but you're faster, so you gotta slow down.
It's the native New Mexican. Apparently we have this accent and we speak really quickly.
Just say it one more time.
Okay, I got you. Okay, the complete documentation to be provided to the Regulation and Licensing Department.
So what that does is it says they have to give that to us. It's what has to be as part of their application.
Okay.
Everything they would give to the licensing department.
Okay, and then you said J?
After J, inserting a K, which will specify that the zoning permit approval shall be granted on a contingent basis, requiring that the licensee provides an approved license.
Okay, you're gonna have to repeat that for
Certainly,
Aaron.
yes.
Let's go again.
Okay, the zoning permit approval shall be granted contingent upon a licensee providing a valid license upon approval from RLD.
I'm sorry, approval what?
Approval from RLD, excuse me. And that's to ensure that once they have the license, they've got to come back and give it to us.
And RLD stands for Regulation and Licensing Department?
Yes, correct.
Can I just read it back for the?
Yes.
Right, so you would be inserting a subsection K to state the zoning permit approval shall be granted contingent upon the licensee providing a valid license upon approval.
Okay, so if you strike A, then everything's going to move up, letter-wise.
A will be exchanged.
Change date, oh, okay, good. Change date to be the complete documentation provided by,
yes.
okay, I'm sorry. I got it.
That's okay, there's a lot of subsections, so, okay, so this is the amendment then that we would be voting on to change those two parts under 1845C A, to change A and to add K. So we're going to have to work on that first. Do I have a motion to approve the amendment?
I move that we approve the amendment as provided by the council.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Right, thank you. We're going to take a voice vote on this. Counselor Parker?
Madam Mayor.
Oh, we're not
I have
ready
one
yet?
more. I have one more. Oh, okay. Sorry. No.
Counselor Parker?
Yes.
Counselor Lucero?
Yes.
Counselor Knight? Aye. Counselor Murray?
Aye.
Counselor Waldman? Counselor Burkett? Aye. Thank you. All right, next.
Okay. The next one, I actually have to go to my computer for this one. Sorry.
Mayor, council, this was the issue of cleaning up the language about what intense agriculture is
Okay.
to alleviate the cows on the.
Right, that was never, you know, those are the kinds of things that are always so frustrating when you're doing these kinds of ordinances. It has completely unintended consequences.
Okay. And I will admit, first and foremost, this is not perfect by any means. So particularly from the community, if this seems like it would apply to you, please speak up because I want to make sure that we don't unintentionally create a prohibition where we don't intend it.
Okay.
So intensive agriculture, I propose we change this language to now mean any agricultural activities conducted in greenhouses, which involve raising crops on a land-intensive basis, and including activities which require heightened utilization of pesticides, concentrated fertilizers, and water usage from irrigation.
Okay, I got intensive agriculture means any agricultural activities conducted in greenhouses? Is that where the first part is?
Yes,
Okay,
correct.
so that clears that up. And then the second part there, Corey, I didn't quite catch.
Okay, which involves raising crops on a land-intensive basis
Okay,
and includes activities which require heightened utilization of pesticides, concentrated fertilizers, and water usage from irrigation.
What happened to labor and capital?
Are you proposing that we insert that as well? The reasoning, Councilor Murray, that I think that labor intensive is something that we perhaps should strike is because I think that that creates the impression that we got that by agricultural and labor intensive, we may be meaning things like a dairy farm, having cattle or other animals, which I hope that including activities conducted in greenhouses makes that clear. But I would hate to leave room for, yes, please, no cows in greenhouses.
okay. So let's, Aaron, do you have that or do you want?
Yes, certainly. It is going to be fabulous
Section
question.
1829 definition.
Yes, section 1829 definitions, and it's just going to be a replacement definition for intensive agriculture.
Okay.
All right, Aaron, are you ready for me? Okay. Means any agricultural activities conducted in greenhouses which involve raising crops on a land-intensive basis land intensive. Yep.
basis.
Go ahead.
Okay. And includes activities which require heightened utilization
Okay, which includes activities using heightened or utilizing heightened, I'm sorry, say that last. And
Sure.
includes activities.
which require heightened utilization
Okay.
of pesticides, concentrated fertilizers, and water usage from irrigation.
What was the one so heightened utilization of pesticides, concentrated fertilizers, and
Water usage from irrigation.
Okay, so let me have Aaron just read that, and then I will take a motion on passing this amendment.
okay, so in section 1829, the definition of intense agriculture would be changed to read, intensive agriculture means any agricultural activities conducted in greenhouses which involve raising crops on a land-intensive basis and includes activities which require heightened utilization of pesticides, concentrated fertilizers, and water usage from irrigation.
All right? Okay. For irrigation, I think. Did you say from or for? I think it's for.
You said from, it's for, I think.
I know, that's what we just corrected. I believe we corrected it. but, okay.
Yes, I think you're correct.
Okay. All right, so we now have this new definition of intensive agriculture, which hopefully sort of cleans it up and narrows it down to certain specific types of agriculture in greenhouses. Do I have a motion regarding this amendment?
I move we accept the new definition of intensive agriculture.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Counselor Waldman. Yes.
All right, question. So if I build a facility that is not considered a greenhouse, would the intensive agricultural be applicable to this definition?
Councilor Murray, respectfully, if you managed to build a facility that didn't qualify as a greenhouse, I would be impressed.
Well, I mean, it doesn't have to be a greenhouse. A greenhouse, we got a definition already that specifies it's a semi-rigid facility. So if I build a blockhouse with no windows, only a door or so forth, I could still raise cannabis inside there as long as I meet all the state requirements. I think it's the look and feel and design of the building itself that might be more subjected to intensive agricultural definition.
So what would you recommend as a?
Well, I would
word
say
other than
greenhouse or structures,
Greenhouse or structure.
or something to that effect.
Okay. What do you think, Corey?
Sure, I'll reread the definition of greenhouse and just see if that seems like something that we should amend. I'm wholly open to the
But
suggestion.
you may
Absolutely.
be right, and maybe it's included in the definition. It seemed like to me though.
Greenhouse is like 2 o'clock.
Yeah,
Greenhouse means a completely enclosed structure whose structural members are made of preformed rigid construction materials. Greenhouse also means an accessory structure with transparent or translucent roof and or wall panels intended for the raising of plants or crops.
I think so, okay.
Okay. All right, so we have a.
That definition of greenhouse is very, very vague. Is it both climate code as facilities to heat and cool, or is it just a greenhouse? There's a big difference. You guys are just, this is not right. There are different kinds of greenhouses. There's shade structures, there's
wintering houses, there's full-blown greenhouses. That definition there does not cover it at all. Sorry.
Facilities in Colorado use warehouses, renovated warehouses for intensive use.
Okay, thank you. I think, where did the definitions come from?
One of the definitions was the pre-existing definition for a greenhouse within the ordinance. And then the additional one was intended to include more temporary structures, such as hoop houses or anything that you could throw up, PVC and some clear film.
So would a warehouse, let's say, be included in this?
I believe so, because I believe that would be a structural member made of a preformed rigid construction material.
Okay, we could do an additional, C to like a warehouse, and then C, whatever you wanted to do, we could put that as additional definitions, I suspect, but I would think we probably would be covered for that.
Mayor, may I suggest that maybe we'll take the definition tonight and then come back next council meeting with maybe an improved definition?
Right, and that's absolutely correct. There's no reason that our definitions can't be made more specific, but I do believe under these two, we have a lot of specificity.
The only thing we would have to do, we just have to go through the amendment process again for other amendments. This isn't going to be left open.
Well, I understand that, Councilor.
All right, Councilor Waldman?
Yes, I'm just wondering, given that, how much flexibility will we have after September 1st before January 1st to make any kind of changes?
It's an unknown area. What'll happen is applications happening on September 1 will come in under these regulations. If we find that we need to amend them, then the new regulations, if we pass them, would apply to any applications coming in after that.
So whoever applies September 1st is grandfathered.
Well, yeah, whatever, equal opportunity. Okay, so I have a motion, I have a second. We've had discussion. Any further discussion before I take a vote? All right, we're going to start with Councilor Burkett. Councilor Waldman.
Aye.
Councilor Murray.
Aye.
Councilor Knight. Aye. Councilor Lucero.
Aye.
And Councilor Parker.
Aye.
Do we have any other amendments? No, we're
I believe we're
finished.
done.
Okay, so now that we've finished the amendments, we're going to go back to the underlying ordinance, proposed ordinance number 2106. I believe, do you want me to put another motion in a second on the floor? Or I know we already have one. It's already there, so, right, as amended. So as amended, now we're looking at the 2106. I'm going to take a voice vote on this. Councilor Parker?
Aye.
Councilor Lucero?
Aye.
Councilor Knight? Aye. Councilor Murray?
Reluctant, aye.
Councilor Waldman?
I'll second the reluctant aye.
Councilor Burkett?
No.
Okay, the ordinance passes, so these are the regulations that we will have in place when the first applications come to us. And then as we are allowed, or as we find out more about the cannabis ordinance and the regulations, we will adjust to the extent that we can. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. I'm going to give everybody about a 5-minute break because us guys have more business to do tonight. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming.
Wait until April gets the answer.
I'm going to go too.
Do you have your farmer mask on?
I do. I have my chilies.
You ready for
my hot chick? No. I think it's always easy for the peanut gallery to decide how simple things are. I really hope that people see this as farmers. And then everybody's trying to so it annoys me when I go somewhere else. So that
I don't know how to I tell you, I got yelled at and stung by my neighbors. That's too bad. Well, because you did think about being neighborly there. That's really
You are now part of a select group that is here past item number 1. Yeah. Hi. Okay. I know. All right, I'm going to put us back in session now. I think we still have everyone in attendance. So now we're going to go to item number 2, which is consideration, action, and approval of findings of fact and conclusions of the appeal hearing for STR 2105. Do I have a motion on this item? All right, do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? All right, hearing none, I'm going to take a voice vote. Counselor Burkett? Thank you. Counselor Wolfman?
Aye.
Counselor Murray?
Aye.
Counselor Knight? Aye. Counselor Lucero?
Aye.
Counselor Parker?
Aye.
All right, thank you. We're now going to move on to item number 3, which is consideration, action, and approval of resolution 2128. This is a resolution correcting resolution 2119 for the approval to participate in the 2021-2022 local government road fund co-op agreement program with Root and Termini included. My understanding is it is simply a bit of a rewrite because, is this correct, Aaron, that they wanted a little bit additional information that they had not required in the first place?
Yeah,
Okay.
Madam Mayor, councilors, the basic gist of this one is we turned in our co-op resolution that we approved back in August. They kicked it back, denying it, basically because they're being a little bit more strict on the wording, which is not something they had required previously. So all this is adding those little words, basically saying, I believe it's Coronado Road from Loma Larga to the western terminal. And that's all we had to add.
Perfect. Okay. Do I have a motion
So moved.
to approve? Thank you. Counselor Woolman, do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Are there any further questions about this item? All right. Counselor Parker?
Yes.
Counselor Lucero?
Yes.
Counselor Knight? Aye. Counselor Maroon?
Aye.
Counselor Waldman?
Aye.
Counselor Burkett?
Aye.
Thank you very much. All right, the next item is consideration, action, and approval of the execution of the option to purchase Kuntz property. And I don't know, is this a good time for, Randy, did you want to speak to this item for a minute? We do have one person too from the public who wishes to speak.
I will be brief, counselors, but if you'll recall, this is the same process we followed with the Haslam property. Gosh, was it a year ago? It was a while ago now. And this is our ability to exercise our option to purchase the property. We send notice to the buyers if you choose to purchase the property for the appraised value. In this case, the appraised value came in at $70,000 over the floor price of $750,000, and the appraisal came in at $820,000. So if you vote yes on this, what we'll do is we'll send a letter accepting the offer, and then we would proceed toward closing and finalizing all of the real estate documents at that price, that $820,000 price. We do not have any negotiations available because that is the appraised value. Under the agreement that we either have to accept that or not exercise the option.
And that actually, I don't want to jump ahead, but that does relate to the next item as well.
Lopez purchase is exactly the same. It's a smaller increase, but same issue.
And then the financing is under new business, and generally then these two properties go together and we basically have expended the remainder of the 2018 farmland bond.
That is correct, and we have sufficient funds at the appraised values, as
Okay.
I understand it.
Okay, that's fine. So, Ms. Parrish, would you like to come forward? Uh-oh, I think Ms. Parrish is going to need the microphone.
I am. I do have a loud voice, but I'm tired.
Aaron, you're falling down on the job.
Hi, everybody. This is my first time at one of these meetings, so thank you for having me. So my name is Celeste Parrish. My husband and my 3 children all live, we share actually the property line with the Phelps Kuntz. the property. So we are very excited. We've been here about 2 years. And my nervousness is kicking in. Okay, so basically, we were very happy to hear that this is what was going to happen because we weren't sure what next door was going to be. We thought maybe houses or whatever, but so we were really excited. But there are some things we wanted to see if you guys could consider. One of the things was any ideas, if you guys could communicate with us. We had no idea. We heard this secondhand that this was a potential because it backs up right to our home. So our backyard is facing that way. We weren't sure if people were going to be walking in the back where the trees were or if there's going to be roads. So things like that just weren't communicated to us. I have a image of the proposed parking location here and a public viewing area and the Corrales Lateral Trail. So the public viewing area is right. I'm not to explain it, but you have to take a turn down a tiny drive that's shared by myself and our neighbors, and also our kids who ride their bikes up and down that area. And my daughter, who's an adult with special needs, so she's always constantly helping and walking and going to see our neighbor, and that's a area that she walks often. So if the parking spaces are there, that could cause an issue. So we wonder if you guys could take in consideration to move the public viewing area closer to Corrales Road and away from where our property lines meet with that land. And also the Corrales Lateral Trail that is proposed here has like a dotted area. The tree line is blocking it, but it seems as if it goes all the way through, it would be north towards Romero Road, that actually crosses into our easement. We have a land grant easement set back way back in 1957. Then we have documents here. I don't know if you guys want this, but so we're just wondering if you guys are going to make some sort of trail or put gravel down or rocks or cement path, that would go through our easement. So we just wanted to know what your plans were for that and if you guys can work with us or communicate with us. Again, we're very excited about it, but we just want to be part of the conversation. And let's see. Ooh, I think I did pretty good. I got 1 more minute. And the last item I wanted to see is if that road was going to possibly have a name. I don't know, the road where the public viewing area would be. And if it did, we wanted to offer a suggestion because the people prior to us who had it had actually built that built that home. And we wanted to kind of honor them by naming that name after them because we were very grateful for them selling the house to us. And that property, it's a good, we're very happy to be here. Let's just say that. But Des Jardins Road or Calle des Jardins, it means garden. And one of the things that we wanted to do while living here is to bring that legacy of just a natural habitat for all the birds and all the animals and everything that's here. And we want to use our property to be a part of the conservation that's next door to us. So that's what we want. And so we thought, well, if we could name the street, we wanted to offer that suggestion. So I think that's it. I didn't hear a timer. So
Thank you very much. No timer. You're not even being taken off the stage.
Thank you.
I don't know, thank you very much. We do know that we are going to be working with that easement and probably part of it's going to be a transfer from the Conservancy, correct? I mean, you and I talked about this briefly. I know Ms. Stout isn't here right now.
The MRGC controls that access road. And so, yes, it would be an agreement with them to allow our use of it. The part that I don't know tonight, Michael Cisco's not here, is what negotiations we're having with the food system on the location of that viewing area. They're taking it off of their land and placing it there. So I don't know if there's room to negotiate with them at this point. I'm a little concerned myself that this is the first time you heard about it. Because it's way down the path near the adjacent property owner. So we should discuss with Mr. Cisco.
Yes, because I'm going to obviously put this over to the experts here. But in order to get all of this done at the same time, we also wanted to concurrently get this viewing area and easement taken care of at the same time so that we wouldn't wind up, purchasing property with no public use. And also we need to make sure that everybody has access to their property and is informed. So we will work on that. I'm confident, because I pretty much have to be at this point in the calendar, that we can work this out. Okay, one more question, because you have had your time. Okay.
There is a really large parking space available off of Corrales Road to the property line. So the people park their cars there all the time and walk down our road to get there. So there is, I think, an opportunity for you to use that space where you don't even have to put on the property. It's just
Right.
off the.
Well, part of the easement actually is that when they put a conservation easement on, there does need to be a public use. And this is the public use, the ability to have people go onto it and enjoy the nature. So, okay. With those things, and we will follow up. I know it's been moved. I knew that the potential viewing area has been moved a few times. So we're working on it. But anyway, with that, we are now looking at exercising our option to purchase this. Any further comment, Randy? Okay. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Councilor Waldman. Second?
Second.
All right, thank you. We're going to take a voice vote on this. Councilor Burkett? Councilor Waldman?
Aye.
Councilor Murray?
Aye.
Councilor Knight? Aye. Councilor Lucero?
Aye.
Councilor Parker?
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for your comments. The second item here is consideration, action, and approval of the execution of the option to purchase the Lopez property. And I think that is a smaller piece. Randy, did you have something you want to say about that one? I think you may have already covered it, but I just want everybody to understand where we are with it.
I'm moving through the Coons documents just to quote the prices. If somebody has their finger on that item, then please quote us what the price difference was on that one.
Once again, it came in a little bit above the floor price, but not.
I apologize. I didn't realize I was going to have to go through the entire appraisal before I got there.
I'm working it.
Value was $490. After conservation, value reduced by $120. With the price of $270.
Yes, just bear with me.
Page 211.
Thank you. Very helpful. Strangely, not my area.
Okay.
So bottom line was,
I'm actually at like 201 on my computer. I don't know if that's any closer. It said the appraisal of the property came in with a value of the easement of $370,000, which was over the estimated value of property within the option to purchase above. And the floor was 360.
I have a quick question.
So it came in $10,000 above.
that
So
is correct.
It's really close.
Other than that, it is identical to the option to purchase on the Coons property, which is a different value.
Yes, Councilor Knight?
Yes, I just wanted to make sure both of these have water rights to them, right?
There were water rights that were pertinent to the Coons property. The final water rights that will be described in the final deed, which hasn't been completed yet. So all the water rights that are available will be encumbered. But I can't tell you specifically what those are tonight.
Okay, but just there's water to the property. Okay.
Yes. All right, yes, Councilor Murray.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So Randy, I guess the viewing area, do you know how big that is? And it appears to be real small on the east side of the property, is that correct?
It was not a large piece. It was, number of square feet versus bigger. So I think what I'm going to suggest we do is reach out to Michael Cisco to work with the property owners to see if there could be some adjustment if they're open to that.
Do you think they're looking at maybe a stand or something like what we had with the other?
It'll be similar to that, but the location might be flexible to the owners. I don't know. We signed a purchase agreement with that location identified, so we have to be a cooperative effort with the owners.
Okay, yeah, Michael has so far felt that they were quite cooperative, so I hopefully will not have a problem with that, but we will put that on Michael's list, okay? So do I have a motion on item 5, which is the option to purchase Lopez?
Yeah, I'll move that we approve the option to purchase on Lopez property.
Thank you. Second. Thank you, Counselor Knight. All right, we're going to do a voice vote. Counselor Parker?
Yes.
Counselor Lucero?
Aye.
Counselor Knight? Aye. Counselor Murray?
Aye.
Counselor Waldman?
Aye.
And Counselor Burkett?
Aye.
Thank you very much. All right, terrific. Now we're going to move on to new business, which is consideration, action, and approval of resolution 2129. That's a resolution authorizing and approving submission of a completed application to the New Mexico Finance Authority, expressing the intent to issue bonds in the approximate aggregate amount of $1,377,000. And we have experts here with us tonight to help us. We've been through this before, but we definitely have people here to help.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, good evening. As we've discussed, you have before you this evening a very simple and brief resolution, unlike some of the other resolutions and matters you've considered this evening, authorizing the submittal of an application to the New Mexico Finance Authority to complete the financing for the Kuntz and Lopez properties, and authorizing the transaction to go forward. The application would be submitted to the New Mexico Finance Authority by the 26th of August, which is coming up, and go through their approval process where in the interest rate would be set, and then we would be back to you for final approval of an ordinance with the exact terms of the financing, likely in November. And the goal here is, as Madam Mayor indicated, to marry up, so to speak, the real estate transactions that Mr. Audio is working on with Michael Cisco and the finance package, so that with a goal of closing by the end of the calendar year. And have with me esteemed Mr. Archuleta, who will talk to you a little bit about the terms of the financing.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor and councilors, John Archuleta with Stifel. What we are currently looking at is a 10-year payback. Interest rate on this particular transaction will be a little over 1%. So translating this, you're going to borrow $1,377,000, and the interest cost is going to be somewhere around $66,000 or so. So that's just the estimate based on what the market is right now. By the time we actually go through the market process and get approval from New Mexico Finance Authority, that's when the interest rate's going to be set. But the market has been holding pretty steady, so it'll be a little over 1%, it looks like, overall net interest cost.
Not bad.
No, ma'am. It's still very good interest rates. And that's all I have. You have any questions or concerns?
Do I have questions or concerns? All right, thank you very much. Really appreciate your coming here tonight and helping to move this along. It is not an easy process, right? There's a lot of steps.
It has been a true team effort, Madam Mayor, and we appreciate all of your hard work and the efforts of the staff and the whole team, Michael and Randy and Ron and
Right.
and Village.
Thank you. It does take a village in this case. Okay,
Indeed.
do I have a motion on this item?
So move, Mayor.
All right, thank you, Councilor Lucero. Do I have a second? Thank you very much, Councilor Waldman. All right, I'm going to take a voice vote. Councilor Burkett? Councilor Waldman?
Aye.
Councilor Murray?
Aye.
Councilor Knight? Aye. Councilor Lucero?
Aye.
And Councilor Parker?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, number 2 is consideration, action, and approval of the contract extension for WH Pacific for engineering services. Ron, would you like to say a word?
Madam Mayor, this is a fairly normal extension. It's a 2-year extension as provided for in the original contract. The work that's been done by WP Pacific, H Pacific has been very satisfactory. It also comes with the fact that we have a lot of knowledge and institutional knowledge about the village with the company. So we recommend it very strongly.
Thank you very much. I can take a motion in a second and then discussion if there is any. Do I have a motion on this?
I move we approve the extension of WHP Pacific.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions regarding this contract? Yes, Councilor Murray?
Yeah, thank you. Ron, do we have a maximum amount that is limited to how much we spend for these services?
There is none.
It's an open contract.
It is an open contract.
Do we know how much they're spending?
I can get you the exact amount on that. We can do that, but it's within what I would consider normal standards and rates. We use the company a lot, and we use it for everything from Meadowlark Phase 1 and Phase 2 to a lot of our site plans that we go through P&Z, and we're also using them on the Thompson Fence Line Trail and others. So I can get you the exact number of what we've spent.
I was just curious if there was a limit set where it comes back to us, for approval if anything goes over the certain amount.
If we get to a point like that in the contract, then we'll certainly come back. But at this point, I don't see a problem with it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, I'll take a voice vote. Councilor Parker?
Yes.
Councilor Lucero?
Aye.
Councilor Knight? Aye. Councilor Murray?
Aye.
Councilor Waldman?
Aye.
And Councilor Burkett?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Okay, the next item is discussion of our ICIP. This is, of course, our annual quest for monies from the state legislature. We will be looking to try to firm this up at our September meeting. Then Aaron will be putting all of those things into a, we hope, not changed once again system, but all of that comes in with more detail. And then we will start talking to our legislatures between now and when the session starts in January. And we will be hoping to convince the legislatures to give us funding for these projects. I think Aaron's already mentioned that the final 4, I guess on the second page, are actually funded and would actually perhaps come off of this list. Again, and I think this is, I hope this is not as confusing as it was at first. We want all of you to go ahead and denote which projects you would like to see given priority. The understanding, I hope, is that the legislators do not necessarily pay any attention to us on this. And every year we do our best. I think what we're going to do, which we did last year, we'll make up a beautiful brochure again. We'll see if we can invite them to come and we'll smooze them and then the session will start. And then the last day when they finally get started, they will call again and say, what was that? What did you want? I kid you not. And this is the way it works. So I think if you have questions about what you see here, I think that Ron could talk to you a little bit about the fact that he's spoken to all of the department heads and they've expressed their wants and needs. But if you have any particular questions about something that you see on this list, please, please express that now or anytime in the next few weeks so that when we come back in September, we'll kind of be ready to think about it. Yeah, Councilman Murray.
So Mayor, animal service vehicle, I thought I understood Aaron to say that we were getting 40K for animal service vehicles already. Is this for an additional vehicle or is this a continuation?
No.
Trying to get more vehicles.
So what had happened is in the original animal control ICIP request, it was a total request for 80,000. In 20, I believe 19, we were granted 40 of the 80,000. This one that's coming up is the remainder of that 40. So to my understanding, and I'll let Chief Vic correct me if I'm wrong, they've purchased or they have already purchased a livestock trailer. They're in the process of purchasing a truck, and this additional $40,000 is kind of just for whatever sort of equipment or other needs that they have. I don't think that they're on the prowl for necessarily another truck. They have a new one right now, and then another one is coming in. So the remaining 40,000 is kind of, they're chewing on it, figuring out what they're going to spend it on. But I'll let Chief Vic speak to that directly.
It's Council Murray, Mayor, Council, Aaron's spot on with it, and it really depends on the time. And right now, the newer of the two vehicles being operated by Animal Services is a 2015. So, you know, perhaps by the time these funds are set in stone, we will need to replace that one. However, it'd just be the one vehicle. The livestock trailer is at the shop getting the decals and everything taken care of right now. The new truck that we're going to use to tow that is expected to be delivered around October because of the microchip shortage. That vehicle, I think, was ordered in April, and we're looking at October. So we may use part of that 40,000, probably around 25 of it for another vehicle if necessary by the time the funds come around. However, we're looking at other enhancements to the yard area that was just fenced in. That was the fencing was paid for by the Dennis Friends Foundation grant. And, you know, so maybe some enhanced runs there, some concrete work and some kennels in the back. So we'll definitely have a use for that additional 40,000 or remaining 40,000.
You put on a year on the animal services. I mean,
not much, Councilor Murray. They are very conservative with their vehicles, take really good care of them as well. But I'm going to say maybe the 10,000 mile a year range. Yes, yes, Councilor Walden.
If there is 15,000 left after 25,000, perhaps another vehicle.
Yes, sir.
Is that restricted in any way? In other words, could they use that for, we know that there's a problem from time to time providing food for dogs or cats they may have there, or other kinds of, for microchips, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Might that money be available for that use?
Councilor Walden, Mayor and Council, the ICIP request was written specifically for vehicles and equipment. So you know, think items like such as food could not be purchased, but say leashes, you know, something that can be considered equipment, yes. But the Dennis Friends Foundation has been able to supplement some of those types of things. Yes.
That's great. Did you want to speak to your police vehicles and equipment item as long as you're here?
Sure, yeah, Mayor and Council. We put a lot of miles on the police vehicles, much more than the animal control. You know, 15 to 20 year probably average on those, depending on the shift and the individual officers. But they wear out. You know, we try and get a good 6 years or so out of them. So what we'd be looking at, you know, we're probably looking at 2022. For these types of things is to start replacing some of the 2017s that we have and just get them rotated out of the fleet. And beyond that, you know, I think we'd only be looking at 3 to 4 vehicles if we were granted another 195,000. But we could come in within 160, I think, for 4 fully equipped vehicles. And then for the remaining 35,000 or so, we're getting to where we need to start replacing some of our body armor. They have a 5-year expiration date on them. That's from the manufacturer. I've never seen one turn to dust after 5 years, but I would hate to be, you know, the proof that no, they're not good after that long, right? So yeah, we definitely want to replace them as soon as we can, close to that 5-year expiration date. They run about $1,000 a piece, and we have 15 sworn officers, so there's 15,000 right off the bat there. Then of course laptops, those types of things where the technology just gets outdated. So again, we would definitely find a use for that whole 195,000. We could certainly use more, but we found from our experience that if 195 is an easier sell than 200,000, right? Or 250,000. And so maybe it's more doable for some of our legislators.
Thank you very much, Chief. Councilor Murray, and then
Yeah,
Councilor
thank you,
Gordon.
Mayor. So Chief, let me ask you this, as part of what Ron was alluding to, or the green initiative within the village. Do you know if for first responder vehicles, do they have any electric ones available? Or
Councilor Murray, Mayor Council, so they're sort of in the experimental stage. There have been, I want to say Santa Monica or one of those Southern California agencies had a Tesla, or probably still does, and they're experimenting with it. Some of the issues were, well, I guess it would be just like gas. If the officer doesn't fully charge it before a shift, just like if he doesn't fill his tank and he gets into a pursuit, he could run out of gas. And they had a case where they ran out of electricity and were just dead in the water. And, you know, all the Southern California criminals were having a great laugh over that one. But some of the issues is when the vehicle's idling, is all the other equipment that's on. You know, if it's a traffic stop, you've got the lights and the radio and the computer, everything that's going on. So we're still not quite to where I'd be comfortable being the guinea pig with that. And then of course, you know, you have the initial purchase cost is much higher for the electric vehicles. And then I'm not necessarily sure we could find quick service for them, you know, if need be. I know, like with Tesla, they send their text to you and they drive forward. So, you know, I'm not ready for it. You know, I want somebody else to be the guinea pigs and make sure that it's 100% ready for public safety use before we were to take on the electric vehicles in our fleet. Maybe down the road for a detective vehicle, say, where we don't have to worry about patrol use if we have that option.
Councilor Gordon?
Yes, just a quick question. Aside. Body cam.
Yes, sir.
How's that working out?
Councilor Waldman, Mayor and Council, I'm going to say excellent, but you know, we were on board 5 years before the state mandated the program, and I've seen to where they do reduce citizens' complaints. I've seen a pretty decent drop in those numbers. They enhance the officer accountability, the transparency for the agency. The state requirements were a little burdensome on us as far as the mandatory 120-day storage. I got a call Christmas Day from Julie Rogers that we were out of storage. What do we do? And so Systems MD has on-call personnel, and luckily they were able to increase our storage remotely. We paid for it, but in any event, Ron and Aaron were able to find some grant money to where we are now storing everything in the cloud. It's being managed by our provider, our vendor out in California, and soon the DA's office is going to have direct access to their discovery requests, and that'll free up a lot of Aaron's time and Charlotte's time at the front desk as well. But overall, there are so many more pros than cons. So the short answer is they've been working out really well. Thank you.
Any more questions for Chief Matchcraft? Okay, well, thank you. I'm glad you didn't feel like you came for nothing tonight.
Okay. Thanks, Mayor and Council.
Do we have any other questions on any specific items here? We do. I would feel kind of bad because we do have our fire chief here. And so we've heard from our police chief. So Chief, would you like to say something about any of the items on this list? Oh, you're welcome. I
Mayor,
don't want to be
Council,
accused of
Ron,
favoritism,
thank you.
know.
I just appreciate the offer and allowed to be able to put items on the ICIP, as you know. We really appreciate this and take advantage, especially for our high priority items such as the fire suppression. We're very thankful we got some money last year for a fire substation, except for, it's not enough to really, we're going to try to do a design and plan, but it's not enough money to start construction. And as you know, similar to the police department, we're always trying to replace our fleet or have some sort of schedule. And, we're going to be upgrading and trying to upgrade an engine. However, fire trucks now are costing $500,000 roughly and fully equipped. So we're always seeking funds. So again, thank you for allowing us to include items on this list. And any questions for me pertaining to any of my items?
Thank you, Mayor. I do have one that kind of goes back. I should have asked Tanya this when she was up. With the emergence of Delta variant for the coronavirus, you think we're going to have more, is more money going to be coming down the pike after the first of the year? Because this is probably going to drag out, I expect, another 6-7 months.
Are you talking about like Rescue Act funds? Are you talking about money for PPE?
Well, both. I think about it covering all the bases that we're going to need, in place. I think the Delta variant is going to be around for a while, but I was under the impression that the money ran till the end of the year, and then we may not get any more after that.
Mayor, Councilor, yeah, and I can assure you, we're trying to stay on top of all those funding sources. We try to get notification early on, and with the administration and stuff, we try to really stay on top of that and apply for any sort of funding and get all of our paperwork in time, so we don't see a burden on the village and our departments.
And Tanya Commander Latin is really A1 at getting money.
She
getting-
is, yeah,
filling
and
out those grant requests.
she'll find it, she'll fight for it, and with the support of all the administration staff. Mayor, I think I heard you say it earlier. It takes a village. It surely does, and I'm speaking on all the staff here. They're rock stars. So
Yeah, it is.
Yep.
Councilor Knight, then Councilor Waldman.
Chief, do you see the fire hydrants going south at all, or?
Yes, you do.
Yes, it's a very good question, Mayor, Councilor. So as you know, we have funding that we have been working really hard to get approval from the state so we can get that hopefully executed in the maybe next week or so, and that's going north. We're currently applying for the Fire Protection Grant Fund, which this year I'm proud to say we're going to receive 100% of these funds or monies are going to be going to the grant. So it allows more departments like ourselves more of an opportunity to apply for more. And in that grant, we're trying to include going south. So my focus has been north, but the southern part of the village is going, what about us? And so we're trying to include them as well. And a little update, which it does pertain to the RICIP. I had a meeting today with the church, and we're moving forward and trying to get those easements, and hopefully we can get this tied in from our Loma Larga pumping station to our main station and lock in some of this other money that's been sitting there for a few years. So, yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to be sending up the balloons. I'm just going to say this, when the Catholic Church, which is not known for its speed, is actually the partner that is working the hardest to try to get something done, as opposed to the city of Albuquerque.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
think that's saying something, really.
Yeah. They've been
very, very helpful.
yes, outstanding. So, and I actually have some documents here for the attorney, so hopefully I can catch him before he leaves. But again, we really just do appreciate the opportunity to include some of our high priority stuff. So thank you.
Councilor Waldman?
Chief, given what's happening in California and elsewhere in the West Coast, last year you provided a number of firefighters to go to California to help out.
Yes, sir.
Anything this year?
Mayor, Council, yes, we have been receiving some of those requests. However, due to some staffing issues and COVID and just some of our current conditions, yes, we've been receiving some monsoon rains, but conditions right now just don't allow us to maybe send, we'll see now, maybe we'll reevaluate. But again, just communicating with my colleagues, just right now, I just can't spare anybody.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you, Chief. Ron, did you have anything, did anybody have any questions about any of the other items on the list tonight? If not, I'm hoping that you will take some time to review it, and we'll see. We've done quite well the last few years, and we're trying to now get that money and start with the projects, but we've got some that really could be exciting over the long haul. So just let everybody know so that we'll be kind of ready to. Do you want people to submit their priority list to you, Aaron?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, Council, if you want, and again, it's entirely up to you. It's just all part of the process. Typically, we have you send in like your top 5 or top 3. So just read this. And again, if you want to number every single one of them, please do so. And we'll take it into account. Typically, we go through a process with department heads, kind of getting their input. Ron and Mayor have a lot of input, and then you have input as well. So send me your rankings, maybe your top 5s, and then we'll have a tentative ranking list at the September 14th meeting, and we can shuffle stuff around a little bit here and there, but we'll try and get it as close as we can get. And again, I think the mayor mentioned it. I would just reemphasize, it really is up to the legislator's whim. Actually, if you look at our rankings from the last year and what was funded and what was not, about 60% of it was actually in the lower half of our rankings. So just keep that in mind, but it is still an important process.
And for the larger items, we would probably be breaking some of those into phases. That would be the way that we would get some help from the state. So thank you very much for that. And we always look forward to our ICIP attempts, and we've been pretty successful. The next item is consideration, action, and approval of Resolution 2130. This is a resolution in support of an extension of the cooperative agreement D18575, control number HW2-L300263. Do I have a motion on that?
So moved.
Great. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, thank you, Councilor Waldman. Is there any discussion about this item? Any questions regarding this, Councilor Murray?
I was just curious about why the delay. Yeah, why the delay?
I can answer that to some
Certainly.
degree. Madam Mayor, Council, these are funds that were tied to Meadowlark. We have been dealing with that for quite some time, and money has been sitting still for the past year or two. These are the funds that we're using to pay for Meadowlark, and so the extension is due to those circumstances. The general rule of thumb, and it's kind of a trick, is for the cooperative agreements and all the grant agreements, the letter is actually indicative of the year. So these are 2019 funds that we're trying to extend into next year, essentially.
It looked like to me this was for Sagebrush and Camino de Lucia.
It's both. So this is that it's all tied together. And so that cooperative agreement in that particular year was split in 2 ways, but they're still tied together. So it is for Sagebrush and Camino de Lucia as well, but Meadowlark has been the big holdup on those funds.
Not anymore. Okay, Councilor Waldman?
Yes, I'm just curious. On Sagebrush, this is from Loma Lark and Krause Road, and I'm sure it's, the straightening of whatever. We have to do the same process if we decide we want to pave Sagebrush all the way to the top, the western edge.
I'm sorry, can you ask that question one more time?
Yeah, I have a lot of constituents who are concerned about paving Sagebrush to the top of Sagebrush, the far western end, to link into the Thompson fence line, et cetera. Do we have to go through the same process here, or are there funds available for that?
So typically with co-op and MAP funds, we have to put in an application for that specific route and termini. And so we did have a meeting, I believe, on Monday, so yesterday, to talk with Mike about what his priority list was for road projects. I know that Sagebrush is one of those. Whether it's all the way to the top, I don't know. I don't recall. Ron might remember. I do know that Mike's main concern was actually the portion from Loma Larga to where the pavement ends, that needs to be rehabilitated first before continuing to go up the road.
Okay, because I've had some other constituents who are concerned about bumps and the gaps and those kind of things.
Yeah.
In that section.
Yeah, so that, to my understanding and from what I can recall, the general process for Sagebrush would be to do the bottom section between Carlos Road and Loma Larga, then to do the section up to where it's paved, basically at Salse. And then I'm uncertain about, there would have to be a lot of design going into the one to the top because of drainage and flooding issues.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so I think we have a motion and a second. So are we ready to take a vote? Counselor Parker?
Yes.
Counselor Lucero?
Aye.
Counselor Knight? Aye. Counselor Murray?
Aye.
Counselor Waldman?
Aye.
And Counselor Burkett. Thank you very much. All right, we're going to move on to item number 5, which is consideration, action, and approval of Resolution 2131. This is a resolution to authorize the assignment of authorized officers and agents for SAP 20-E2207-SGB, $50,000 capital appropriation to plan, design, construct a wastewater emergency bypass and collection system for Corrales in Sandoval County. Do I have a motion?
I move we accept resolution 2131.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, thank you very much. Anyone have any questions on this item? All right, hearing none, I will take a vote. Counselor Burkett? Counselor Waldman?
Aye.
Counselor Murray?
Aye.
Counselor Knight?
Aye.
Counselor Lucero?
Aye.
Counselor Parker?
Aye.
All right, thank you very much. The last item before we get to announcements is we have 3 individuals, 2 who have signed up to become part of our Planning and Zoning Commission, and 1 for our Bosque Advisory Commission. I have spoken to all of them, and they seem like they are committed to the process and committed to serving the community. So I would take a motion to approve.
So move.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All right, let me do a voice vote. Counselor Parker?
Yes.
Counselor Lucero?
Yes.
Counselor Knight?
Aye.
Counselor Murray?
Aye.
Counselor Waldman?
Aye.
And Counselor Burkett? Thank you very much. I know they're going to, they really all express a great deal of enthusiasm, so I always appreciate it when community members are willing to serve. The next item would be announcements and future agenda items. I know that we're going to be working on our ICIP next time. Ron, do you have some other items that we're going to be looking at that we know for sure right now? I'm sorry. Yes, a parade resolution. That's very important. Haven't had one in so long that, anything else? Councilor Waldman?
Question about that. Given the Delta variant and what we're facing and increasing, could that be problematic? And when will we have to make that final decision? I thought we can.
Can we put that on the ICIP list?
Yeah, we need to.
I have another
I think
microphone.
that would be petty cash.
Yeah.
Used to be petty cash.
Yeah, we're really not, we're not.
I'll just talk loud. So, you're gonna follow the state guidelines. Grades get banned in the first week of
And it's the same calculus for the Harvest Festival, Counselor Waldman. You know, they don't know, they're not 100% sure, but we're going to go ahead and plan. And then with the idea that we may once again have to veer away.
I think Starry Night is the upcoming quickly. That would be the next thing.
Well, it is going to be outside, I think, and I think the outside activities have a little bit more of a chance.
Do we know where the fence line ordinances that Councilor Burkett's been asking about for the last 6 months?
Well, it's not like we haven't had much on our agenda. So I did talk to Councilor Burkett in the last few weeks, and he was kind of understanding. And I'm going to guess that may be coming up in September. What do you think, Ron? I know it's almost all but ready.
I would say that's definite.
And I think the thing that Maida Rubin was sort of counseling was that there's sort of a certain order to things. And so this would be a little bit out of order, but it is important to him. And just so you know, Maida Rubin actually has left the COG and will be working for Rio Rancho, which is a shame because we loved Maida Rubin. But she was trying to make sure that this project is left in good hands, the Chapter 18, so that we will continue to move on that. And in fact, we may have some more things ready to discuss at our September meeting on Chapter 18.
We were scheduled to have meetings, joint meetings with planning and zoning and the council regarding Chapter 18.
Mhm.
Is that still in the works?
Yes, I think that is still in the works. All right, G, here I am. M, anybody want to adjourn?
Are we done?
All right.
I move we adjourn.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
All right, we're all in favor, I think. So thank you very much. And I really appreciate all the effort and thoughtfulness all of you put into the items that were before us tonight. Thank you.
Night, guys.
Good night.
All right.